Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now, let's dive into today's story. Ethan Lawson, a tech entrepreneur in his mid-30s, poured his heart and soul into his business, often leaving his personal life on the back burner. His wife, Lily, also in her 30s, ran a successful online boutique and took great pride in her work. Despite their busy lives, Ethan thought they shared a strong bond, until a single day changed everything. Mark Everett, their landlord and a familiar face in their neighborhood, was a friendly man in his 40s, frequently around for minor repairs and friendly chats. However, he had a hidden side that would soon unravel Ethan's life. Ethan hadn't taken a day off in months. The stress of running his tech consultancy was unrelenting, but today he decided to listen to his body's call for rest. He woke up feeling fatigued, and for once he allowed himself the luxury of a day to recharge. Thoughts of reconnecting with Lily filled his mind. Their interactions lately had been strained, with both buried in work, but he missed her company. He remembered when they'd spend entire weekends together, just talking or exploring new places. Smiling, he thought today could be a fresh start. He sent Lily a quick text. "Hey, thought I'd surprise you with lunch today. Let's take a break together." Her response, though, felt colder than he'd hoped. "Busy with work. Maybe some other time." Ethan's heart sank slightly, but he reasoned that she was likely having a rough day, too. After all, running her boutique took as much energy as his consultancy did. Determined not to let this setback ruin his day, Ethan decided he'd surprise her with her favorite lunch anyway. Later in the day, he stopped by a local cafe, picking up her go-to meal and a small bouquet. Driving back home, he envisioned her face lighting up at the sight of the surprise lunch, hoping it might rekindle the closeness they once shared. His day off was turning out differently than he'd planned, but he remained optimistic. But as he pulled up to their house, a strange car parked outside caught his eye. It was sleek and unfamiliar, definitely not a friend's. At first, he dismissed it, thinking it could belong to a contractor or delivery person. However, the feeling of unease was hard to ignore. As he approached the door, he heard laughter, Lily's, interwoven with a man's voice that sounded unsettlingly familiar. Standing at the door, bouquet in hand, he felt his stomach churn. He told himself he was overreacting, but a gnawing suspicion urged him to step inside quietly. As Ethan entered their house, he moved cautiously, his footsteps barely audible. The laughter he'd heard from outside was now clearer. It was indeed Lily, but her tone wasn't one he recognized. She sounded carefree, almost flirtatious, something he hadn't heard in months. The man's voice, distinct and unsettling, became clearer too. That's when it hit him. It was Mark, their landlord. Ethan's grip on the bouquet tightened as he moved closer to the living room. Ethan observed them from behind the doorframe, feeling his heart pound in his chest. The sight before him made his breath catch. There, on their couch, sat Lily and Mark, far too close for comfort. Mark's hand rested casually on Lily's knee, his body language relaxed and intimate. Lily, instead of moving away, seemed comfortable, her laughter soft and familiar in a way that shattered Ethan's perception of their relationship. For a moment, Ethan felt as though he were outside his own body, watching from a distance. His mind raced, each thought cutting deeper than the last. How long had this been going on? Had she been playing him all this time? The cufflink he'd found on the windowsill that morning suddenly took on a new meaning. How many signs had he ignored? Summoning his composure, he stepped into the room. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with pain. Lily's face turned pale, and she shot up from the couch, eyes wide with shock. Mark, too, stiffened, removing his hand from her knee. "Ethan, it's not what it looks like," Lily stammered, her voice trembling, but the look in her eyes told him the truth. Ethan felt his heart shatter as he looked at her. Words failed him as he turned and walked out, leaving the bouquet and takeout on the table, a cruel symbol of what he'd hoped today would be. Ethan didn't go far. He stood on the front porch, fighting back tears as he processed the betrayal he had just witnessed. The love he had poured into their relationship, the sacrifices he had made, everything felt like a cruel joke. He paced back and forth, emotions raging. Every fiber of his being screamed to leave, but something inside him needed closure. After a few minutes, he walked back inside, determined to confront her. Lily was still sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, while Mark looked as though he'd rather disappear than face Ethan's wrath. "How long has this been going on?" Ethan demanded, his voice low but fierce. His eyes were locked onto Lily, who couldn't meet his gaze. Lily fumbled with her words. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. It just happened. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" Ethan repeated, his voice rising. "You've been seeing him here in our home and it didn't mean anything? Is that what I am to you?" Mark tried to interject, but Ethan silenced him with a glare. "Get out," he said firmly. "Leave, now." Mark didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his jacket and made a hasty exit, muttering apologies that fell on deaf ears. Once they were alone, Lily broke down. "Ethan, please let me explain. I was lonely. You've been so distant, always at work. I didn't feel loved anymore." Ethan laughed bitterly. "So this is my fault? I was working to build a future for us, and this is how you repay me?" Lily's tears flowed freely, and she reached out to him, but Ethan pulled away. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," he said, his voice cold. "Right now, I need space." Her face crumpled, but she nodded, grateful he hadn't asked her to leave immediately. She couldn't have known that this was the calm before the storm he was about to unleash. Over the next few days, Ethan maintained a veneer of calm. He allowed Lily to think he was considering reconciliation, even allowing her to stay at home, giving her a glimmer of hope that their relationship might survive this. But inside, he was seething. Every time he looked at her, memories of that betrayal replayed in his mind, each one fueling his resolve. Lily, oblivious to the storm brewing within him, did her best to make amends. She cooked his favorite meals, left him apologetic notes, and tried to initiate conversations about their relationship. Ethan responded with minimal engagement, giving her just enough to believe that forgiveness was possible. In reality, he was biding his time, plotting his revenge with meticulous detail. He spent hours at night going through her boutique's online platform, reviewing all the work he had helped her set up. He had access to her inventory, her customer lists, her social media accounts, all the tools she had relied on to grow her business. Slowly, he began gathering everything he needed to execute his plan. During the day, he kept up the act, even suggesting they go to counseling. Lily's relief was palpable. She believed their relationship could be saved. She had no idea that he was waiting for the perfect moment to pull the rug out from under her. He wanted her to feel secure, to believe they had a future, before he took everything away. One evening, when Lily left to visit a friend, Ethan decided it was time to begin. He accessed her website, deleting products one by one, erasing the customer database she had built painstakingly over years. With every click, he felt a grim satisfaction, knowing he was dismantling the business that meant so much to her. He drafted a cryptic message to her loyal customers, apologizing for the sudden closure and stating that the boutique would be shutting down indefinitely. His hands didn't tremble. His actions were steady and purposeful. He imagined the devastation Lily would feel when she discovered her life's work, her pride and joy, had been erased. When she returned that night, he said nothing, acting as though everything were normal. He could see the spark of hope in her eyes, the belief that they could repair what she had broken. Little did she know that by morning, everything she had worked for would be gone. The next morning, Lily awoke to a flurry of messages from her customers. Confused, she opened her laptop, her heart racing as she discovered her entire boutique had vanished. Her products, her customer list, her website, all gone. Panic overtook her as she tried to recover the files, but it was too late. Everything had been wiped. In desperation, she turned to Ethan. "My business. It's gone." Someone hacked it. Everything is gone. Ethan met her gaze with cold indifference. Maybe now you know how it feels, he said quietly, his voice devoid of sympathy. Her face crumpled as realization dawned. This was his doing, a calculated revenge to make her feel the same sense of betrayal she had inflicted on him. She fell to her knees, sobbing, but Ethan remained unmoved. The sight of her despair gave him a bittersweet satisfaction. He had loved her deeply, but that love had been shattered, replaced with a hollow sense of justice. In the weeks that followed, Ethan filed for divorce. He watched Lily struggle to rebuild her life, haunted by her actions and the consequences they had brought. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but for Ethan, each day brought a renewed sense of freedom. He no longer felt shackled by the hurt she had caused, finding solace
in the knowledge that he had found closure. Thank you for watching this story. Betrayal can come from those closest to us, but in the darkest moments we find our strength. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.
Be prepared served as the Boy Scouts' motto. The Scouts' code differed, emphasizing qualities such as trustworthiness, loyalty, helpfulness, friendliness, courtesy, kindness, obedience, cheerfulness, thriftiness, bravery, cleanliness, and reverence, along with seemingly contradictory traits of naivety, stupidity, idiocy, and trust. Surprisingly, these aspects coexisted seamlessly. Nick had no other answers. Typically, he refrained from inspecting anything on his wife's iPhone, a practice she acknowledged. Consequently, she neglected extra security measures. Being a Boy Scout, Nick upheld honesty and avoided invading privacy. However, with his wife heading out of town soon, he sought her hotel's name, aiming to avert a potential disagreement arising from his forgetfulness, a recurring issue lately. Post their wedding 5 years ago, this impending trip marked their lengthiest separation. Nick contemplated a romantic gesture, like sending flowers, to express his love while she was in the romantic city of Paris. Yet, his plans were disrupted by the realization that Dwayne, not he, was the one she would be sharing this experience with. Entering his wife's phone code, their wedding date, Nick found himself perusing WorkSafe emails exchanged between Linda and Dwayne. Their discussions included a nighttime stroll down the Champs-Élysées and then a moonlit boat ride on the Seine. Almost as surprising as the affair itself was the fact that Nick's wife, Linda, and her lover, Dwayne, exchanged messages using their work email accounts. She should have known better. So should Dwayne. Like Nick, Linda was a lawyer. Dwayne worked as a paralegal at Linda's firm. All three, Nick, Linda, and Dwayne, had experienced enough document handling and major litigation. Huge teams of lawyers and paralegals read each of the hundreds of thousands of emails received or considered as part of document discovery. There was always a story about an affair by one or two idiots, and then the lawyers would try to figure out if the affair was relevant, and if so, how to limit damages. Nick didn't really pay attention to what Linda had told him about the trip and the name of the hotel where the team would be staying, because something funny was going on at that moment. Nick didn't know what it was, but instinct made his hair stand on end. 5 years as a lawyer listening to clients lie, and listening to lawyers carefully avoid lying by not telling everything, had made his listening skills sharp. And something was wrong when Linda initially told him about the trip, a very boring arbitration case that would keep them so busy they wouldn't even be able to enjoy the sights. She said it without looking at him at all, and a little too flippantly. She knew Paris was one of Nick's favorite cities, and they always talked about going together because Linda had never been there. Nick discovered her response to be peculiar, but the worst-case scenario had not even crossed his mind. Yet, the content of the email he was presently reading seemed like a direct stab into his heart. Dwayne had suggested the idea of letting go of the Boy Scout for them to spend more time together without worry. Linda expressed that she felt safe with him. Nick questioned her about deceiving him behind the Boy Scout's back, making him excited. Uncertain about what to do, Nick decided to print the email on the Wi-Fi printer in the basement, just in case. As a seasoned lawyer, his initial task was to preserve the evidence by printing the letter and placing it in his computer bag. Nick took a moment to think. He was certain about what he wanted to do. In his view, he had a win-win option: feign readiness to kiss her, then abruptly collide with a tree in the woods behind the house. Dwayne, on the other hand, would face less mercy before causing damage. Nick needed to think, and thinking was what defined him as a lawyer. He was paid to utilize his brain, not his muscles, and he had to think quickly because Linda had gone for a run and would return soon. Before he could delve into his thoughts, he had to complete his assignment and find a hotel, not to send flowers. He wasn't sure why he needed that information, but he sensed a purpose. La Clef Tourfell, near the Trocadero, across the river from the Eiffel Tower, a 5-minute walk from the International Chamber of Commerce, where Linda and Dwayne would be working on their arbitration case with the rest of the team. During the lovers' free time between hotel rendezvous, he had to conduct a quick computer search on Virginia's divorce laws, drawing from his bar exam days 5 years ago. It was always good to check. Infidelity was grounds for divorce, and could impact matters like alimony and property division. However, there were objections to the charge of infidelity, one being convenience. The defense was to discover the infidelity and then willingly resume coital relations and continue living together. Hence, he needed to leave the house promptly. Confrontation? Not yet. His plan was to unleash total shock and awe on her. With no uncertainties, he aimed to dominate the battlefield to end this marriage, even if it meant lying. It conflicted with Scout law, but this was war. After all, Churchill stated, "In war, truth is so valuable that it must always be accompanied by a bodyguard of lies." Nick's lies now served a more critical purpose. None of them were under oath anyway. He went up to the bedroom, swiftly packed, and placed the suitcases by the front door. Just as he gathered the necessary paperwork, bank and credit card statements, 401k and IRA accounts, car papers, paycheck statements, mortgage statements, and Linda's latest student loan balance, she returned from her run, and he heard her in the kitchen as he ascended from his basement office. Upon observing her drinking Gatorade, he decided to feign concern, appearing out of place. Despite her looking good with shoulder-length brown hair and a ponytail, he came to the realization that love was dead. He conveyed the news of going to Paris with a grim smile. Linda's face lost its color, and her blue eyes paled. In response to his announcement, she quickly regained composure, asking if it was Paris, Virginia. Nick explained that Sven had called, informing them about testifying in his insurance case and the need to prepare a witness. He mentioned the complications arising from losing a motion to compel, causing chaos in the court schedule. Nick anticipated being on the road for a few weeks, with the possibility of stopping by to do laundry from time to time. Linda, adopting a suitably concerned expression, remarked sympathetically, suggesting that maybe his firm was recruiting. Nick expressed a preference for her version of Paris. Linda, noticing worry returning to his face, then smirked, teasing him to send her a resume, hinting at the possibility of considering him for a job. It was a playful jab, considering Linda's law school ranked higher academically than Nick's. Perhaps feeling guilty, she gestured as if about to hug him, but Nick turned and headed down to his office before she could close the gap. The visions of him punching her in the face resurfaced, and he wasn't sure he could keep them under control. Rising, Linda inquired about his dinner preferences. He informed her that he couldn't stay and would grab something on the road, mentioning Sven's excitement and eagerness for him to hit the road immediately. He spoke while walking through the kitchen, and Linda followed him to the door, appearing a bit worried as he took the suitcases and headed for the exit. For a goodbye kiss, she pressed her lips together, expressing regret that she might have a cold, citing a sore throat in the afternoon. Linda followed him to the car as he loaded it up. He answered her question about his return, stating that it probably wouldn't be until Friday at the earliest. After Paris, they were heading to Roanoke, and the following week, they had to go to Baltimore. Noticing a change in Linda's demeanor, he thought she might be growing more paranoid. He observed her staring off into the distance, as if calculating the unexpected possibilities his absence would open up. He waved goodbye and drove away from the driveway, hoping she'd assume he was busy with work and annoyed at being called in on a Saturday. His acting skills weren't capable of much more than that right now, but he suspected she was already planning to ask Dwayne out. Nick drove until he reached the nearest shopping center with a coffee shop. Like most lawyers, he thought better on paper. Sipping his coffee, he began making a list of cases. He paused for a moment to realize that he had never once thought about reconciliation. It wasn't even an option. Retribution would be inevitable. The only question was the degree. He was interrupted by the phone ringing, and upon not recognizing the number, he impatiently answered. The caller introduced himself as Sam Granger, explaining that he obtained the number from old real estate records. Granger quickly got to the point, stating that he was in the business of buying old houses to tear them down and build McMansions. He acknowledged the general disapproval of his work, but noted that people tended to dislike him less when presented with a check. Nick didn't have much time to react, only thinking about how the house wasn't old but cozy. He wondered why Granger was talking about tearing it down. However, his rational mind took over. Granger expressed his interest in buying Nick's house to tear it down, mentioning that he couldn't guarantee the timing of new construction, especially with county permits. He clarified that his profits came from renting out the new properties quickly. Despite Nick's initial surprise and confusion, he could hardly contain a Grinch-like smile at the prospect of a potentially good offer, especially if he and his wife were motivated to sell. Linda had picked out a house shortly before their wedding. It was an old ranch house, but with a nice yard that looked right out onto a patch of woods with a creek running through it. It was close to major highways, but was quite secluded and peaceful. What finally won her over was the treehouse in the yard across from the bedroom window. She appreciated that the house was suitable for children. Nick, on the other hand, liked the price and the convenient location, being only 20 minutes from a major metro parking lot. The prospect of a 30-minute train ride to work seemed like a reasonable option for the neighborhood. Nick addressed Mr. Granger, expressing that he would be occupied with work for the next few days, making it challenging to ensure access to the property. Granger insisted on being called Sam and reassured Nick that he didn't need to see the inside, emphasizing that it was a demolition job and he had already assessed it from the outside. Nick agreed to meet on Sunday morning, informing Sam that he would likely handle the deal closing himself by executing a power of attorney for his busy wife. Sam had no issue with this arrangement and offered to provide the necessary form. Nick noted the address and began outlining a plan. Reflecting on Linda's reliance on her Boy Scout, he pondered the irony that Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the Boys movement, had drawn inspiration from military scouts, emphasizing skills such as stealth, cunning, and self-reliance. Considering an ambush strategy, he knocked over his empty coffee cup and went to his car for privacy. Nick dialed a number on his cell phone and then another, addressing the person who answered as Frank. He urgently requested a favor, needing it immediately. Frank Barry was a private investigator during his 5 years as a corporate lawyer. Nick made it a habit to assist poor people with their legal problems pro bono. This aligned with his ideas of public service. Additionally, he received a per-hour fee from his firm for doing so, and real courtroom experience, something his day job usually didn't provide. One of his law school classmates recommended Frank to assist with a nasty divorce case in which a stepfather was coitally abusing his stepdaughter. Frank's evidence allowed him to apprehend a boyfriend when the sluggish police response failed, and thanks to that evidence, the divorce case was resolved promptly. Frank listened attentively as Nick explained what he had learned. He inquired if Nick believed his wife would invite the other person into her bed that night and commented on her perceived brazenness and arrogance, highlighting her academic achievements. Frank expressed his determination to handle the situation himself and conveyed gratitude to Nick, mentioning the positive publicity the Rivera divorce case had brought him. Nick acknowledged Frank's words, expressing appreciation. He then informed Frank about a house in the backyard that might be useful for his purposes. Nick described how it opened right into the bedroom, where Linda liked to practice martial arts with the curtains open. He shared that there was a way to access it by going through the woods and jumping over the creek after dark, with no fences or dogs. Nick provided details about a service road on the other side where one could park. Expressing his thanks, Nick suggested placing a camera outside aimed at the front of the house to monitor the comings and goings. Nick and Frank discussed using Harry for a divorce, with Nick confirming that he indeed wanted a divorce. Frank acknowledged Nick's decision and mentioned being familiar with how Harry preferred to have the affidavit and report done. He expressed confidence that they would find out the truth soon. After the conversation with Frank, Nick reached out to Harry. Harry initially thought it was about the law school reunion, but quickly realized it was something else. Nick clarified that he wanted to hire Harry because Linda was cheating, and he wanted to take legal action. After bringing Harry up to speed on the situation, Harry suggested that Nick come back the next day. Despite it being Sunday, Harry had some paperwork to deal with at the office and planned to stop by. He proposed starting the process and acknowledged that Nick seemed to have already addressed the issue of avoiding infidelity. Nick informed Frank that Harry was dealing with clear and convincing evidence, highlighting the challenge of the financial settlement, as Linda, being a lawyer at a large firm, had the resources to prolong the case with the support of her colleagues. Despite this, Nick assured Frank that he would handle the situation and believed they could settle it amicably. In the next conversation, Nick spoke with Harry, expressing the intention to settle the matter civilly rather than seeking vengeance. Harry acknowledged Nick's approach and agreed to see what he could come up with. Nick's final call was to Maggie, and the initial silence was palpable. Nick explained that he needed her help regarding Linda's infidelity. He apologized for past mistakes, acknowledging their affair and letting Linda cut Maggie out of his life. Despite Nick's emotional plea, he left Maggie to process his request. Eventually, she agreed to help, expressing gratitude for Nick's ability to make her laugh. She even teased him about meeting her new partner and proposed a dinner date when the dust settled. He needed somewhere to hide out for a while and make a plan of action. So, he found an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax, far enough away from the usual places he and Linda frequented that he wouldn't be spotted, settled in, and went to get some food. He wasn't particularly hungry, but he knew he needed something in his stomach to digest the drinks he was about to drink. The restaurant, called El Mariachi, was across the street from the hotel. It would be enough because the free Joels and cheese would just make him sick. As the hostess sat him down in a booth, he saw the bartender looking at him. He seemed vaguely familiar, but Nick put the thought out of his mind. He had enough to worry about at the moment. To see pupusas on the menu meant that the restaurant was a Central American establishment pretending to be Mexican. Most Americans didn't know the difference. Along with his meal, he ordered some cheap tequila. He knew the next day's hangover would be brutal, but he considered the pain part of the rite of passage. The waitress returned with a bottle of excellent top-shelf tequila and a highball glass. When Nick looked up at the waitress, she merely pointed to the bartender, who saluted him. Nick accepted the greeting and poured himself a generous portion as the bartender went back to serving other customers. It took a moment, but Nick remembered who he was. He remembered that the bartender was one of the people who had attended Rivera's divorce hearings and the criminal trials Nick had attended. He always sat in the last row by himself. No one ever sat next to him. Once his client, Sonia's daughter, hugged him. But when Nick asked Sonia who it was, she remained silent and said he was just a family friend. Nick ate in silence, making notes in his notebook and drinking tequila. When the waitress cleared away the dirty plates, he went to the break room. He felt like everything around him was moving, like on a ship. When he walked, he needed to lean against the wall while he went about his business. Then he went back to the booth, trying to keep steady, and found the bartender sitting in his booth on the opposite bench. The person addressed as Senor Nick warmly greeted him, expressing gratitude for Nick's assistance in helping his cousin end a problematic marriage. Nick attempted to downplay his role, but the bartender persisted, sharing that the cousin's ex-husband had suffered severe smackings in prison, resulting in the belief that he might never walk or eat solid food again. The bartender disclosed this information with a slight smile, and Nick, feeling a chill, remarked that he hadn't heard about it. The bartender casually dismissed it as yesterday's news. Nick, sitting down, tried to shift the focus and asked about the bartender's curiosity regarding his presence alone at El Mariachi's on a Saturday night. The bartender inquired about Nick's wife, describing her as beautiful. Nick locked eyes with the bartender, who maintained a smile. It wasn't mocking, but rather knowing. Nick couldn't fathom why the man posed such a peculiar question. How did the bartender even discern Nick's marital status? Then, Nick recalled Linda surprising him at a hearing and kissing him. The bartender must have lingered in the courtroom afterward. "We had some problems with her," Nick admitted. He saw no reason to deceive or withhold information, such as her involvement with someone else. The familiar smile reappeared, rendering Nick momentarily speechless. The bartender pointed out that keeping secrets involved not writing them down and leaving the paper in plain sight, gesturing towards Nick's notebook, which contained elements related to infidelity, a sketch of Dwayne with a knife, Linda's name circled with a slash, and a to-do list mentioning "burn that pig." Nick acknowledged the lapse in operational security, but noted that he hadn't disclosed any client secrets. The bartender advised Nick to consider what he truly desired aside from money and suggested revenge as an option. Nick didn't hesitate, expressing a violent desire to physically damage Linda. The bartender's smile widened, and he chuckled, cautioning Nick about the legal consequences of such retaliation. He emphasized that people who act violently often end up in jail, a situation Nick would likely want to avoid unless visiting clients. Acknowledging Nick's irrational thoughts, the bartender sympathetically suggested that he might be of assistance. He referenced Nick's past help to his cousin, acknowledging that she could have asked him for help, but for various reasons, she refused. Nick stepped in and resolved her issue, earning the bartender's gratitude. Nick tried to interject. Sure, he had Frank gather the evidence, but he had the police handle the investigation. It didn't hurt that Nick asked one of the partners in his firm, a former assistant United States attorney from the area, to have a quiet chat with the Commonwealth's attorney to ensure the criminal case was handled properly. Nick accompanied his client just to guarantee the prosecutors treated her with the respect she deserved. The bartender dismissed Nick's protests, expressing gratitude for his assistance to forgotten people like his cousin. He emphasized being indebted to Nick on behalf of his family and offered to repay his debts by providing assistance. Nick, unsure of the bartender's identity, asked for his name, and the bartender revealed that some people referred to him as El Diablo, or the Devil, though friends called him Jose Garcia. Nick jokingly asked if he had to sell his soul to get a favor, and El Diablo responded with a smile, calling it professional courtesy, and playfully noting that lawyers have no souls. El Diablo then requested Nick's address, his wife's name, and details about her daily routine. In response, Nick inquired about El Diablo's plan, suggesting that he stay blissfully ignorant and report on his movements over the next few months. He advised El Diablo to get a cell phone for communication, leave a number at the bar, and refrain from returning to El Mariachi's for the best outcome. Nick shared details with El Diablo about hiring a private investigator, his plan to remain at home until Linda's departure for France, and provided information about Linda's travel plans. El Diablo, aware of the Paris hotel location without disclosing how he knew, posed a question to Nick. He inquired about the possibility of reconciliation, forgiveness, or mercy, emphasizing the importance of resolving any doubts. The smile on El Diablo's face gave way to a serious expression as he awaited Nick's response. Nick, maintaining eye contact, took a deep breath and expressed his simple values of trust and loyalty. He admitted that his marriage lacked these values, with Linda triggering a transformation in his feelings from love to hate. Although he expected indifference to develop with time, that moment had not yet arrived. El Diablo, after hearing Nick's sentiments, reassured him that there was no chance for reconciliation. He concluded the conversation by telling Nick not to worry about a thing. The waitress brought the bill, and El Diablo dismissed her, letting Nick tip generously. He also allowed Nick to take a bottle of tequila, but advised him to take his time, needing sharpness for the upcoming battle. Surprisingly waking up without much of a hangover on Sunday morning, Nick arrived at Harry's law office at 10 a.m., where he found Frank already present. Apologizing, Frank informed Nick that Linda was engaging in lovemaking activities with another man in his bed. Despite receiving a video copy, Nick was cautioned by Harry against watching it. Harry intervened, advising Nick against any reckless actions. Nick, assuring Harry, mentioned that he followed Harry's earlier suggestion to climb into the treehouse, obtaining clear shots of their faces and evidence of their physical interactions. He described the situation as merely a physical phenomenon, with the two hardly engaging in conversation, just having fun like rabbits. Nick wasn't sure if this revelation would alter their plans. Harry, responding negatively, inquired about the details. Nick spared him the specifics, but mentioned the high stamina of both individuals involved. Harry expressed his gratitude, albeit with a tinge of regret. Nick, in turn, apologized for sharing the information. Harry proceeded to reveal that Linda personally attended Nick's party last year, and they identified the man involved as Dwayne Martin, a colleague of hers. Although they couldn't determine the duration of their affair, they had clear and convincing evidence, including camera footage of their comings and goings. Harry assured Nick that he would email a link to the live feed on their secure server and mentioned that he would draft a report and supporting affidavit. Harry apologized once again, acknowledging Nick as a friend. After shaking hands with Harry and Nick, Frank left the office. Harry then inquired about Nick's plans, and Nick expressed the intention to file for divorce based on grounds of infidelity without directly filing against Linda. Harry looked at Nick without displaying any particular emotion. Nick assured Harry that he didn't want him to do anything reckless and believed the process would go more smoothly than expected. Harry grimaced at the suggestion. Nick continued, advising Harry to file the divorce case on Monday afternoon, just before the clerk's office closed. He requested Harry to inform him of the case number, assuring that he would handle the rest. Nick reminded Harry that he didn't practice criminal law well and wouldn't be able to assist if Nick encountered legal trouble. "You'll be pleasantly surprised," Nick declared as he exited. His next destination was a meeting with Sam Granger, proving highly productive. Nick discovered they could sell the house for over $100 of the mortgage, without a real estate agent's commission. Linda would be delighted. Nick pledged to have the necessary paperwork ready for a swift deal closure. Exiting Sam's office, Nick checked his phone. No messages or calls. She must still be enjoying time with Dwayne. Nick took the chance to urgently request 2 weeks of vacation or he would quit, leaving his boss, Sven, in a panic. Luckily, Sven granted the request, given a temporary lull in business. With the groundwork laid, Nick returned to the hotel to focus on the real work. By Monday evening, he was prepared. Throughout Sunday night and Monday, Linda left unanswered voicemails. Nick conserved his energy for Tuesday morning. Thanks to Frank's front-facing camera, Nick knew Dwayne spent Monday night there, likely leaving for work around 8 a.m. Linda would depart around 8:30 a.m. So, at 7 a.m., Nick walked in yelling, "Honey, I'm home." Upon hearing brisk footsteps upstairs, Nick observed Linda, who appeared disheveled and shocked as she descended in her robe. Linda greeted him with attempted cheerfulness, expressing surprise and panic. Nick, maintaining a cheerful tone, apologized for not returning her calls, attributing it to the demands of being on the road. Disregarding the wine glasses, he headed to the dining room, and Linda, unsure of how to prevent him from reaching Dwayne, stood in the doorway. A knock on the door caught Linda off guard, and Nick asked her to answer it. As he spread papers on the table, Linda opened the door, expecting a bailiff with divorce papers. Instead, Maggie entered and greeted with a simple, "Hi." Linda watched curiously as Maggie unpacked her briefcase at the dining table. Nick, feigning sincerity, apologized to Linda, expressing the need for a renewed power of attorney due to potential financial or medical issues during their travels. He also mentioned an offer to refinance his mortgage and apologized for the short notice. Linda, after some initial tension, inquired about Maggie. Nick introduced her as Maggie, and Linda visibly relaxed. Despite having a lover hidden upstairs, she felt events weren't entirely out of control. With a smirk, Linda referred to Nick as her Boy Scout, emphasizing his readiness and claiming it was just the way she was, though her eyes remained wary. Handing Linda a pen, Nick began rearranging papers in front of her, explaining that the check marks with arrows indicated where she needed to sign. Linda, expressing trust, responded with a wide smile and promptly signed all the papers in front of her. He hoped that was the case because otherwise he wasn't going to get anywhere. But he who dares wins, as they say. While Linda signed each document, Nick organized them and handed them to Maggie, who lined them up and notarized them. "Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID?" asked Maggie. Linda got up from the table to find her purse. Maggie and Nick exchanged glances, but both had to quickly lower their eyes to the table to keep from laughing. Linda brought her driver's license to the table. Maggie took a picture of it with her phone and wrote the information in her notary journal. Linda offered coffee, but both Nick and Maggie declined. While Maggie recorded the notarized documents in her journal and Nick sorted everything into different folders, Linda looked up, expecting Nick to attempt something and calculating her next move. Maggie left, stowing away all the tools, and smiled at Nick when Linda wasn't looking. Nick gave Linda a break, stating that he needed to have a teleconference and would go down to his basement office to do so. Linda's shoulders relaxed. For now, she would have time to escort Dwayne out the door and erase any trace of his presence before Nick reappeared from his man cave. Nick went downstairs to give her the illusion that she was still fooling him. He pretended not to hear Dwayne's heavy footsteps descending the stairs, or the sound of the garage door opening so Dwayne's car could pull out. But upon hearing the sound of the shower running in the master bath, Nick gathered everything he had, walked out the basement door, and left in his car without a word to his loving wife. 2 hours later, after a hearty breakfast at the diner, Nick was in Harry's office. Harry appeared shocked as Nick explained that he had managed to get the wife to sign a form, CC 1406, agreeing to the service of the divorce petition on her and waiving service of court notices and notices of any future proceedings. Harry examined the properly notarized form that Nick presented, and Nick confirmed that it was indeed signed. Harry sought clarification, asking if Nick had also persuaded his wife, an experienced attorney, to sign a property division agreement. This agreement included provisions such as giving Nick all the proceeds from the sale of their house and its contents, the cars, and Linda's jewelry. Additionally, it granted Nick full discretion over the disposition of Linda's personal belongings and allowed both of them to walk away with their respective retirement accounts, with no alimony in Linda's favor. Nick affirmed these details, emphasizing that Linda, who earned more money than him, willingly agreed to leave the marriage with approximately $125,000 in retirement contributions and about $200,000 in undergraduate and law school debt, according to the documents. Harry, seemingly skeptical, remarked that Linda had a generous nature. Harry then turned his attention to the affidavit Nick claimed Linda signed, admitting to cheating and acknowledging the presence of her lover in the marital bedroom at the time of signing. Nick confirmed these details and referenced an email correspondence where Linda discussed staying with her lover because he aroused her. Nick, showing no visible emotion, asserted that the documents spoke for themselves. Harry glanced at the papers, looked up at Nick, and started to smile but suppressed it, twisting in his chair. He expressed frustration, mentioning his intention to file all the presented documents. Harry, feeling embarrassed, acknowledged Nick as a respected member of the bar and a friend from law school. He admitted being unaware that Nick was fabricating the situation and stated that everything appeared fine to him. Harry, addressing the court, suggested disbarment for Nick, emphasizing the violation of trust by his client. Nick, understanding the situation, inquired about the notary's potential role as a witness if needed. Harry confirmed that the notary could testify that Linda signed the documents and might mention seeing her scrutinize them. However, Harry refrained from providing an opinion on Linda's understanding of the document contents. Nick agreed to the plan, and Harry mentioned that he would file all the documents, including Frank's affidavit and report, which contained attached photos and a DVD. Harry intended to keep it out of the electronic file temporarily to prevent it from making the news. Nick emphasized the importance of keeping things quiet, considering Linda's impending departure for Paris in a little over 2 weeks. He asked if Harry knew anyone at the county courthouse. Harry mentioned Seth, a day student from the year after them, currently clerking at the county courthouse to build up his resume. Harry believed Seth might be able to expedite the process, but he cautioned that if the judge wanted live testimony, the entire plan could collapse, and Linda would need to make a decision. Nick informed Harry that Linda did not want to contest the case on fraud once she understood the situation. He mentioned that if things took a negative turn at that stage, he might have to let go of Harry's services, to which Harry agreed. Nick expressed a desire to hear the full story someday, but conveyed his reluctance to discuss it at the moment. Over the next 2 weeks, Nick successfully maintained a distance from Linda. He sent her text messages at off hours, letting her know how busy he was, but he answered her calls the rest of the time. Over time, she began to call less frequently. "You scared the hell out of her," Frank told him at the end of the week. Judging from the videotape, Dwayne hasn't been in the house once since you showed up and surprised them Tuesday morning. I can't tell if they're meeting at his place during the week or having fun with each other at the office, but they're not doing it in the house. I'll tell you if anything changes." The only thing that had changed was that Nick had quietly returned to the house when he found out Linda was gone and had taken the financial papers he thought he might need. He also signed a contract to sell the house to Sam Granger. The transaction was to take place during Linda's first week in France. The rest of the time, Nick went to the gym, did some leisure reading, and pondered how he had gotten to the point where he was 30 years old with his life in such disarray. He told Sven that he needed a few more weeks off, and Sven reluctantly agreed. "She's having fun with him at the house again," Frank said Saturday, a week before Linda was scheduled to leave for Paris. "Thanks for the heads up," Nick replied. He didn't care, but he knew that once he got rid of the house, he'd rather burn the sheets than sell them. By this time, Nick had watched the video that Frank had given him the first time he realized his attraction. Dwayne was a couple of years younger, and as Frank's investigation had revealed, the guy was a gym rat, constantly pulling himself up in front of the mirror after weight training. Otherwise, he was unremarkable in comparison. Nick was in reasonable shape, but didn't boast a tight belly. Linda seemed to be seeking arm candy, a trait Nick could do without. Before he knew it, Linda embarked on her eagerly anticipated trip to Paris. A member of Frank's team followed her to the airport, ensuring her departure to Europe. Upon receiving the news, Nick went to the house, piled all of Linda's clothes in the living room, and packed up his belongings. The next day, movers arrived, packing Linda's items separately and sending them to storage. They also packed Nick's things and moved them to the apartment he found with Sam Granger's help. Nick easily sold the furniture thanks to Sam's reselling skills. Once the house was empty, Nick did a final walkthrough before taking one last action. He carefully collected wedding photos, the album, and Linda's wedding dress. He brought them to the fire pit under the treehouse on the patio, placed them atop embers, added lighter fluid to the dress, and lit a match. As everything burned, Nick was pleased with the level of detail captured in the video, even discerning details in each photo as it joined the flames. A day later, Nick closed the sale of the marital home, using Linda's power of attorney to sign on her behalf, a move she should have scrutinized. With a separate financial power of attorney, Nick deposited the house sale profit into his personal account, certifying it on behalf of his wife as her attorney in fact, and closed the joint accounts 3 days later. Still, in the initial week of Linda's French trip, a construction crew razed the house. Days later, they cleared the debris, starting preparations for the site. Unfortunately, the tree with the treehouse had to be removed for a planned gazebo. However, construction halted once only an empty square of land remained, due to issues in the permitting process. Nick and his law school friend at the county permit office believed the problem would resolve upon Linda's return, with proper forms submitted and approved. Throughout this period, Nick ignored all of Linda's attempts to contact him, not responding to calls, emails, or voicemails. El Diablo, using the landline, informed Nick that Linda and Dwayne appeared stressed and didn't look their best, suspecting something was amiss. Nick asked how El Diablo knew, to which he simply claimed to have connections everywhere, even in Europe. El Diablo inquired if Nick wanted Linda's wedding and engagement rings, and upon Nick's refusal, asked if someone else could acquire them. Nick agreed. 2 days before Linda's return from Paris, Nick visited Harry's office, receiving an unexpectedly swift divorce decree. Seth, tight-lipped, facilitated the process, and Nick opted not to inquire further, congratulating himself on his newfound single status. Harry provided a copy to send to Nick's ex-wife, expecting her delight. As Nick was getting into his car outside Harry's office, his phone rang. Receiving a call from an unfamiliar number, Nick recognized El Diablo's voice as soon as he answered. El Diablo advised Nick to take a vacation immediately, suggesting he go to a place with a lot of people who know him and can confirm his presence. El Diablo ended the call abruptly. Nick, understanding the urgency, realized he hadn't seen his college friends in New York for a while. Luckily, they had free schedules in the next few days. That afternoon, he hopped on Amtrak, attended shows, explored museums, and shared meals with friends, most of which he paid for with a credit card. Nick also tipped generously at the hotel to ensure the staff knew who he was. During his stay, he express mailed a DVD copy of him burning Linda's wedding dress and album to Linda's parents' home. Late one Sunday night, while savoring coffee and cake at Little Italy in Manhattan, Nick received a call from his father-in-law. His father-in-law informed him that Linda was in the hospital and going through a difficult time. Nick inquired about the reason behind her condition. His father-in-law explained that Linda had returned from a business trip on Friday and, along with a colleague, had been kidnapped at the airport. They were medicated and only managed to escape that morning. Unfortunately, Linda's colleague had been severely smacking. Nick could sense the emotional strain in his father-in-law's voice. Once upon a time, Nick might have felt sympathy. However, he asked about Linda's condition. The father-in-law explained that when Linda woke up, she found herself covered in tattoos with derogatory inscriptions, labeling her as a fancy woman and a strumpet. Soon after awakening and realizing this, an individual wearing a mask entered and physically assaulted her, breaking her nose and causing 2 black eyes. Nick couldn't help but be impressed by the severity of the situation. Really, it was the cherry on top of the ice cream. He would have been happy if Linda had realized that he had betrayed her in court, just as she had betrayed him in marriage. But this was just a rainbow pleasure of joy. It would be worth an immortal soul if he could give it away. Expressing his condolences, Nick acknowledged that he was currently out of town and inquired about what his father-in-law would like him to do. Detecting surprise on the other end, his father-in-law emphasized that Linda was Nick's wife. Nick, without much emotion, clarified that they were divorced, and the order was issued the previous week due to Linda's infidelity with the man she was traveling with. When his father-in-law seemed confused, Nick coldly mentioned having a video of the infidelity and offered to send a copy. The revelation left his father-in-law in stunned silence. Nick, displaying a lack of empathy, stated that Linda was no longer his problem, and his father-in-law would need to take care of her. His father-in-law, expressing frustration, accused Nick of causing the situation. Nick, unapologetic, explained that he had been in New York celebrating his divorce since Wednesday. He acknowledged the father-in-law's upset state and hoped for Linda's recovery, but conveyed that they had nothing more to discuss. Nick then ended the call. It occurred to Nick at that moment that the stress of city life had been too much lately. He sent Sven an email saying that Sven and the firm could go to hell, respectfully, after all. A quick internet search revealed that there was an REI store in Soho, and Nick got himself some new hiking and camping gear. Linda had never liked camping, so this was a chance to reconnect with her. Scouting past the hotel was very accommodating and agreed to leave his luggage for a while for a reasonable fee, and Nick was on his way to the Adirondack Mountains to commune with nature until things calmed down. Luckily, he had his passport with him in case he had time to travel to Canada, and it turned out he did have time. For the next 8 weeks, he kept his phone turned off. Initially, he assumed some disturbed woman had taken possession of his ex-wife's phone, given the multitude of messages, including frantic screams and cries. He listened to just a couple and deleted the rest. There were numerous crazy emails, too. Her account must have been hacked. Reading through all of this seemed impossible. He hoped the troubled woman responsible would find the help she desperately needed. After 8 weeks, Nick, Frank, and Harry gathered for a drink. Harry clarified that he had terminated their ties with the attorney right after serving Nick the divorce decree, a piece of information Nick admitted to not having checked yet. As they settled at the table, Frank described the aftermath as a serious situation, likening it to a typhoon of destruction. Harry, with a sense of dark humor, found amusement in the widespread chaos. Frank began recounting the events, detailing how Linda, accompanied by her parents, had a meltdown upon seeing the vacant lot where their house once stood. Her emotional breakdown escalated as construction workers arrived, and her tattooed face became a source of laughter among them. Despite her visible injuries and the duct tape on her broken nose, the offensive tattoos on her face, neck, and arms were prominent. Harry took over the narrative, indicating that the work on her face was particularly well done, making the text highly visible on camera. The derogatory phrases included fancy woman, puta, and explicit statements about her preferences. In the afternoon, Linda, along with a couple of lawyers from prominent firms, arrived at Frank's office without an appointment. Frank deliberately made them wait for 15 minutes, ensuring that his loaded Glock was in his desk for safety. Grateful for Virginia's firearm laws, Frank eventually faced their anger, enduring discussions about emergency motions, bar complaints, and contempt proceedings. Despite the tension, Frank couldn't help but be aware of the visible ink on his face, done in red and blue for maximum visibility. When he finally shifted his attention, Frank questioned the nature of their problem and challenged them to identify any false statements in the documents. The lawyers hesitated and looked at each other. Frank then asked if the dispute revolved around Linda's infidelity, to which they all affirmed. Taking control of the situation, Frank played the videotape that had been recording while they waited. The footage clearly showed Linda engaging in lovemaking activities with someone other than her husband in the marital bed. The lawyers, caught off guard and seemingly unfamiliar with the case details, exchanged confused glances. Linda began shouting about not having a chance to explain, claiming that she never agreed to let Nick sell the house and accused him of burning her personal belongings, including her wedding dress, pictures, and album. Frank presented copies of powers of attorney, including one for the house sale, and the property settlement agreement, which granted Nick authority over her personal items. He pointed out that Linda was fortunate to still have her clothes. When Frank questioned if she contested her signature on the documents, Linda admitted to it, but insisted she hadn't agreed to the contents. Frank pressed further, asking if her defense rested on not reading what she signed, and warned her about the potential consequences during cross-examination in court. Linda fell silent, and when Frank referred to the accurate affidavit she signed, admitting her lover's presence during the signing, she lost consciousness. Despite attempts to revive her, she refused to go to the hospital. Later, she complained about tattoos and her boyfriend being assaulted, to which Frank clarified that Nick was out of town and likely had no involvement. Dwayne's altercation may have been with another angered party, thinking Linda was defending him. Frank directed them to the Fairfax Police Department for criminal matters. The drama continued as they discussed filing a motion for reconsideration. Frank received an anonymous email with links to videotapes of Linda and Dwayne in Nick's bed during their escapades in front of Paris, warning of widespread distribution if she persisted. Frank informed Nick about this, stating that these were friends Nick had assisted and who pledged to protect him by activating the send button if Linda persisted. Following their departure, Frank heard nothing more from them. Nothing happened at the courthouse, and Frank suggested that they might have involved the police, who initially sought copies of the videotape and report, but lost interest later. Linda and Dwayne couldn't explain the events, remembering only entering a cab at the airport, with the next memory being in the hospital. Linda woke up in a shabby hotel, endured a punch to the face, and found her way to the hospital, discovering that room charges, room service, and minibar expenses were billed to her credit card. This time, Nick disclosed that the hotel manager, along with New York police officers, had verified his stay, contacting his New York friends who affirmed his active schedule in the city. Harry shared street talk that suggested Nick's ex was hiding in her parents' basement, undergoing an expensive laser tattoo removal due to her extensive coverage. Nick expressed regret, prompting a glance from Harry and a restrained chuckle from Frank. Regarding Meat Eater, Harry reported he suffered severe injuries, anticipating substantial future physical therapy with head damage and difficulty securing another paralegal job. Both were let go by their firm due to relationship breakdown during the trip, adversely affecting the arbitration with missed details, unprepared exhibits, and issues with lost witness notes. The client expressed dissatisfaction, leading the firm to make sacrifices to retain the client for future work. Frank praised Nick, hinting at a future revelation of how he accomplished it. Nick innocently asked, "Managed what? I'm a Boy Scout." Maggie, waiting in the car, expressed her willingness to vouch for watching Linda review each document before signing, but couldn't estimate the time spent. Nick suggested discussing over dinner and treating Maggie for helping him gain his freedom. Maggie clarified, dispelling the notion of a boyfriend, prompting Nick's surprised reaction. She directed him to take her home, ready for a lengthy apology. Nick agreed with a smile, but mentioned a quick stop at the post office to send a card to a friend, featuring a Boy Scout emblem, asking if she felt safe at the moment.
I grew up in a small coastal town where life was simple and steady. My family had deep roots in the community, with my father running a successful insurance business that made our name synonymous with trust. My early years were shaped by the predictable rhythms of small-town life, where I found comfort in studying finances, drawn to the patterns and logic of money and markets. By the time I earned my finance degree, I was determined to follow in my father's footsteps, though with my own unique approach. I wanted to help people grow their wealth steadily, focusing more on caution than on risk. Starting my own practice wasn't easy, especially in a town where everyone already knew me as JT, Joe Washburn's son. But I worked hard, building on the solid reputation my father had established. Over time, I managed to carve out my niche, earning the trust of clients who appreciated my conservative approach to managing their finances. However, as the months went by, it became clear that the town was too small to fulfill my ambitions. I needed to expand, so I began splitting my time between our town and a nearby larger city, hoping to grow my client base and secure my future. This weekend, it was our turn to host the gathering. About once every month to 6 weeks, our close-knit group of 6, 3 couples, would meet, usually at one of our homes. The usual crowd included Sally, Anna's friend, and her husband Carl, along with our neighbor Jackie and her husband Trent. Occasionally others would join, but this was the core group. We were all in our late 20s, none of us with kids. Sally and Carl had decided not to have any, and while Trent had 2 from a previous marriage, they lived with his ex, though he longed to gain custody. There was always food, drinks, and some sort of theme. Sometimes we played Trivial Pursuit, cards, or watched a sporting event on TV. When we met at Trent's house, we swam in his pool if the weather allowed. The girls, particularly Sally and my Anna, would organize these parties with a bit of phoning around to make sure we could gather enough people on a particular date. Anna loved chatting and gossiping on the phone and enjoyed organizing. She's a busty, curvy woman with wavy, light brown hair. She's a bit of a flirt, which sometimes annoys me. She loves the attention, but as far as I know, she's never crossed any lines while we've been together. I grew up in a coastal town in Oregon, where my family still lives. I graduated from the State University in finance and passed the exams to become a certified financial planner. I was somewhat introverted but passionate about studying money, markets, statistics, and the history of our economic system. My dad sold insurance in our town, and his honest and solid reputation gave me credibility in the local financial world. In fact, I was named after my father. He was Joseph Washburn, and I was called JT. I started renting an office in his building and worked hard to set up meetings with folks, explaining my strategy for their money. I want your money to grow steadily but conservatively, I would tell them. I was affiliated with a national company and received a lot of financial data from them. I also spent hours doing my own research, which I really enjoyed. My first year was moderately successful. My clients saw good, solid returns and their portfolios outpaced the market. I enjoyed sharing office space with my dad, and many of his long-term clients became mine as well. I made it a point to meet with my clients regularly, to get to know them better, and to offer personal customer service. They appreciated the contact. As I began my second year, one thing became clear. There wasn't enough business in our town to make a good living. I had my own financial goals, and as a student of economics, I realized that I couldn't support myself with just the business in this town. The weather was nice for our party, so we decided to eat outside. We had a large deck with a barbecue and an outdoor kitchen area. "What do you want the theme to be tonight?" I asked Anna. "Let's play a game," she said. "We'll play a fun and funny game that everyone will love. Doesn't that sound good, JT?" She gushed. There was a little competition to see who could have the most fun at these parties. I mostly enjoyed the company, the food, and the drinks. I admit I do like my wine, and there have been a few times when I had a glass or two too many. "What game?" I asked. "Don't worry, JT, I'll figure it out. You just get the barbecue ready." That was fine with me. As I was getting things set up, my mind wandered to the group coming over tonight. First, there's Sally and Carl. Sally and Anna have been friends since high school. Sally is a little overweight but proportionate. Carl is a diesel mechanic who works at a big shop in our city. He's easygoing and doesn't seem to mind when Sally flirts and shows off. He's a big guy, probably about 6'3". I like him okay, but I probably wouldn't choose him as a friend if not for the connection between Anna and Sally. Jackie and Trent are our neighbors, though I can't recall how we became so close to them. Jackie is plain-faced but has a great body. Not the curvy softness of Anna, more of a taut leanness. She's smart, and out of the whole group, she's the one I have the most in common with. Trent is a golfer. He's lean and about 5'9". There's some arrogance to Trent that put me off at first, but I've learned to like the guy. Not sure I trust him, but he's smart, funny, and fun at these parties. Just then, I heard the doorbell ring. The guests had started to arrive. I had recently decided to move my financial planning practice to the city while keeping my coastal town office. The drive between the two locations was only 2.5 hours. My plan was to spend 1 week each month in the town, staying with my parents and meeting with clients and potential clients. So far, it was working out well. I shared an apartment with Julian Lee, a college friend who worked in IT at a large bank. Julian was very creative, so I was surprised he chose that career path. We had a 2-bedroom apartment in the trendy Maples district near downtown. I could walk to my office, and there were plenty of restaurants, bars, and boutiques within walking distance. It was definitely a young, hip, and trendy area. One of these bars is where I met Anna. Anna worked at Lucas, a popular restaurant and bar about 2 blocks from our apartment. I think it was the 3rd time Julian and I were there when I struck up a conversation with Anna. To me, she looked like a Playboy bunny, voluptuous and pretty. Anna was tending bar, and we got to talking. She asked me all kinds of questions about my life, career, goals, etc. Honestly, I was a bit surprised she was so interested in me. She was gorgeous, and I was just a plain-looking financial planner. In high school, I had a steady girlfriend, Gail Benson. Gail was attractive, smart, and fun to be with. We tried to make it work through college, but it was too difficult. I dated some in college, but never had a long-term girlfriend during those 4 years. That night, as we left the bar, I almost asked Anna out. I even got the impression she wanted me to, but I hesitated, worried she might say no, and we'd have to find a new bar to go to. "Man, she's hot," Julian said. "She's into you. You need to ask her out." "You think so?" I replied. "And you better do it quick. Someone else is going to knock you to it if you don't." The next night, I went to Lucas by myself and asked Anna out for Sunday night. And so, we started dating. I was a little intimidated. I'd never been with a girl this attractive, but she gave me all the right signs that she was into me. It wasn't long before she gave me what I considered the ultimate sign, herself. Sexually, Anna was unlike anyone I'd ever been with. Up until then, I'd had a handful of sexual partners, including my high school girlfriend, Gail. I'd done some sexual exploration, but I was still an undergraduate in experience. Anna, on the other hand, had a PhD. We did everything. She was completely uninhibited, teaching me things, doing things to me, and doing things together. She wasn't overweight, but was soft, curvy, and entirely feminine. Occasionally, I wondered how she learned all these things. How experienced was she? I knew the answer. Very experienced. But I avoided the topic of her sexual history, afraid it would be too painful. Any unease I felt about this was more than outweighed by my sexual satisfaction. Everyone was sitting on our back deck. We had finished dinner, and we were all about 2 drinks into the evening. I think I was on my 3rd glass of red wine. I had a long conversation with Carl about his hopes of being named manager of the diesel shop where he worked. He mentioned that the owner was strictly religious and asked if I thought attending his church would be a good strategy to get in good with him. I told him that unless he was sincere about the religion, it might come off as disingenuous. He said he would have to think about it. As we sat talking, Sally said, "So, Anna, what's the plan for tonight?" "Okay, everyone," Anna began. "Have an open mind and remember it's just for fun. We're going to play truth or dare." I thought, oh no. But Carl, Sally, and Trent clapped and cheered, clearly approving. I looked at Anna and she smiled, then quickly glanced at Sally. Carl and Trent were grinning. Jackie had a half smile and was the only one besides me who wasn't particularly enthusiastic. It started off fairly tame with a hint of sexual innuendo. Nothing too risky. "Who was your movie star crush? How old were you when you lost your pureness?" Etc. Then it was Trent's turn to ask. He chose Anna, and she chose dare. "Sally, I dare you to take off either your shorts or your top," Trent challenged. "Wait a minute," I said. "It's okay. I have underwear on. It's like a swimsuit," Anna said. Anna loves attention, and there have been times when her behavior came close to crossing the line. While I loved the confident sexuality she shared with me, I certainly didn't want others to experience any of that closeness with Anna. She quickly whipped off her top, standing there in her lacy white bra. She stood proudly, and Trent and Carl whistled. Sally giggled. "You go, girl." Anna was loving the attention. I was a little annoyed, but I kept my thoughts to myself. The game continued, with nothing too extreme until Sally was dared to flash. Unlike me, her husband Carl encouraged her. She flashed them, and they were definitely big. Not my taste, but big. Everybody was laughing except Jackie and me. "One more round and then that's the end of this game," I said. There were a few laughs and some protests, but I was worried we might cross a line. It was Anna's turn, and she asked Trent. "Okay, Dare," Trent challenged. "Flash your Johnny for 10 seconds. "Don't you dare," Jackie replied. Without hesitation, Trent stood up, unbuttoned and unzipped, then dropped his shorts and boxers. Both Anna and Sally were staring, while I was shocked and Carl was laughing. Trent even did a bit of a gyration, like a male dancer. When I looked at Anna, she was just staring at him. At this point, Jackie said, "I'm leaving." She looked a little pissed. She also told Trent he could either get in the car with his clothes on or walk home. Everyone left shortly after, officially ending the party. As we were cleaning up, Anna was unusually quiet. As we finished tidying up, I said, "That went a little too far, don't you think?" "Oh, it was just for fun. Don't be such a stick in the mud," she replied jokingly. "Anna, people were unclothed and nearly unclothed here, and you were one of them," I retorted. "Unclothed?" she said. "I'll show you unclothed." And she proceeded to strip. I was quickly and thoroughly distracted. Still, it bothered me how the party had turned out, and I was determined to have a serious discussion about the events tomorrow. I also have to admit, I'm not one of those guys who gets a thrill out of their wife exposing herself or more around other men. I fell asleep sexually satisfied, but somewhat troubled. On Sunday morning, I was up first and went for my run. During the solitude of my exercise, I planned out the conversation I was going to have with Anna. I was going to make it clear that while I enjoy fun and a good party as much as anyone, my wife and our bodies are only for us. We made that vow on our wedding day, and I wasn't going to compromise on that. When I got home, I could hear Anna on the phone. She must have heard me because the laughing stopped and the volume dropped. I thought I heard the word package just before she heard me. "Who was that?" I asked. "Oh, just Sally," she giggled. "She and Carl had a great time and rated our party as the best yet." "About that, I think we should talk about some of the things that happened last night and specifically some of your behavior. Usually, Anna was good-natured, and it took some effort to make her mad. I succeeded with my comment about her behavior. She lashed out saying it was innocent, just fun. "No one else is upset, and nothing happened," she said. I tried to stay calm and explain my feelings, but she wasn't interested. After she vented, she gave me the silent treatment. As I started my yard work, I tried to process my feelings. I really didn't think I was being unreasonable. I wanted to give her some leeway to be herself. That's the woman I married. I appreciated her free-spiritedness, but anything close should be for us alone, including who sees her body. I admit I was a little insecure. Anna is a beautiful, hot woman, and I'm just a fairly plain financial planner. I know I'm not bad-looking, and I stay in good shape, but I also know she gets hit on constantly by all kinds of guys. I had no real reason to doubt her fidelity, but there were a couple of instances before we were married that triggered my concerns. We had been dating for almost 3 months at this point, and had been having sex nearly the entire time. I felt close to Anna, and we had some good conversations where I learned about her life. Her father left when she was young, leaving her mother and an older sister. Anna craved male attention, and once her body started developing, she got plenty of it. I didn't want to delve too deeply into her sexual history, but I gathered that her pureness was gone by age 16. It seemed like she had boyfriends and casual friends she played around with. That was her term. Unsurprisingly, she never had to look far to find the next one. She loved attention and knew her looks could get that for her. We were invited to a party hosted by a casual acquaintance the following Saturday night. At this point, we hadn't formalized our exclusivity, but in my mind, we were exclusive. She had said she loved me, and to me, love and exclusivity went hand in hand. It was December, and the party was a little dressier than usual. When I saw what Anna was wearing, my eyes nearly popped out of my head. It was a red dress that barely covered her chest. "You like my dress?" she teased. "Anna, you look great, but wow, it's pretty skimpy," I replied. "You know, I'll likely have some clients there, and well, it's a little too much." Now, Anna doesn't often get mad, but when she does, it's almost always about how she looks. She got mad. She said I thought she was trashy, that I was worried she'd embarrass me, and on and on. It took some time, but I apologized. Though things were a little frosty, we went to the party, and she wore the dress. The house was large and located in the hills, beautifully decorated, with plenty to eat and drink. Some of my work colleagues were there, along with people I knew from college and others from the athletic club I belonged to. One guy at the party I remembered from college, something McAllister, was one of those arrogant, good-looking types. Confident, with a smarmy smile and slicked-back black hair, he was cruising around with that cocky grin and a glass of champagne. Then he saw Anna. Anna was getting a lot of attention, mostly from men, and most of it was focused on her cleavage. She stayed by my side, and suddenly I became popular with colleagues and casual acquaintances. At one point, I went to get us a drink. When I returned, McAllister was chatting with Anna. He acted like I was an old friend, and Anna was loving it, all the attention, and now this good-looking guy was hanging on her every word as if it were the most fascinating thing he had ever heard. I managed to steer her away from him, but as parties go, we eventually drifted apart. I was talking to some work colleagues who were sharing some useful business ideas. I realized it had been over an hour since I had last seen Anna. I took a quick look around the living room, the kitchen, and the family room off the kitchen. Nothing. I didn't want to appear agitated, but I was on a mission to find her. I also couldn't find McAllister. I noticed a group of people outside smoking and stepped into the winter air. No Anna. As I was heading back inside, I heard her laugh coming from down the street. I walked down the sidewalk, and there she was with McAllister, strolling up the street. It took her a moment to notice me, and as I watched them, they seemed to be enjoying each other's company. "Oh, hi, honey. Jim was just showing me his new BMW," she said. "She's a handful," McAllister said. "I mean the car." He laughed. I looked at Anna. Nothing seemed particularly off, but she did look a little rumpled. I forced a smile, though inside I was seething. As they walked up, Anna put her arm around me. "I'm leaving now," I said. "Just wanted to see if you needed a ride home." "Of course I want a ride home," she said, looking at me questioningly. Why wouldn't I? At that point, McAllister slapped me on the back. "Nice to see you again," he said, extending his hand. Now, I'm no bodybuilder, but I work out and have always had a strong grip. Fueled by my anger at Anna and this guy's arrogance, I gripped his hand hard. By the time he realized what was happening, I was crushing his hand. His knees buckled, and his mouth opened in a silent cry. "Honey, you're hurting Jim," Anna cried. "Oh, sorry. My bad," I said, and I started walking to the car without looking back to see if Anna was following. By the time I got to my car and buckled up, she had caught up with me. This was our first big fight. I really liked her. She was great-looking, and the Zex was off the charts, at least by any standard I'd known. I knew she craved attention and measured her worth by the attention she received from men. We hadn't formalized anything at this point, but to me, a steady sexual relationship where we saw each other more than a few times a week and talked about love was the adult version of going steady. But we had never explicitly discussed it. I dropped her off, and she gave me a puzzled look when I told her I was staying at my place tonight. "Oh, honey, come on up. Nothing happened with Jim. We were just having fun," she said. "Well, I guess I've had about enough fun for one night. See you later," I said, and drove off. She called and texted, but I ignored her. Life went on for me, and I focused on my work. My week on the coast was coming up, so I decided to leave on Saturday morning instead of my usual Sunday night. I called my mom, and she was thrilled to have me for the weekend. I had a good week back in my hometown, with productive client meetings. My steady business on the coast and my growing city practice were making me successful. I was achieving my financial goals and getting noticed within my organization. A week ago, I would have said my personal life was on the right track. I couldn't say that now. She kept texting and calling, and my responses were minimal. She asked when I was getting back, and I told her Friday night. No sooner had I arrived home when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Anna standing there in a raincoat, holding a wrapped present. "This is for you," she said, handing me the gift. I opened it to find an old-fashioned skeleton key inside. "You hold the key to my heart," she said. I stared at her, feeling a mix of emotions. Then she unbelted her raincoat, revealing a figure that could have been straight out of a Playboy centerfold. Any teenage fantasy come to life. Whatever resolve I had melted away in a wave of lust. Afterward, I asked her about what had happened at the party with McAllister. "I know I shouldn't have gone outside with Jim, but he was so nice," she said. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing. He tried to get a little handsy, but I've been handling guys like that since I was 14 years old. We talked, and I told her that I can get jealous. I went on to say that if she wasn't ready for a boyfriend, I'd be sad, but I'd understand. I explained that I'm not the type to play around. I'm either in a casual relationship or fully committed. What we had, I emphasized, was not a casual relationship. She rolled on top of me and told me she was committed too. She also said she loved me and wanted to be with me forever, and then she proceeded to make love to me. Anna doesn't hold grudges, so after the truth or dare party, things returned to normal. She remained the same loving, hot woman I'd fallen for. In fact, she seemed more attentive, and I noticed less interaction with Sally when I was around. One Saturday, while I was working in the yard, Trent passed by, which wasn't unusual since he lived nearby. We struck up a conversation about lawns and gardening, eventually moving to the back deck with some drinks. Although Trent and I weren't particularly close, he was a bit cocky. We ended up talking for a while. He opened up about his custody battle, revealing a vulnerable side that made him more likable. I started to reconsider my opinion of him. Then, out of the blue, Trent asked, "Where's Anna?" I told him she was shopping, and we resumed our conversation. 15 minutes later, Anna appeared in a tiny bikini and ducked behind the privacy screen, greeting Trent as she passed. Trent, of course, couldn't resist trying to catch a glimpse. I quickly wrapped up our chat and walked him to the gate. As he left, he jokingly asked if Anna needed help with suntan lotion. The incident reminded me of a past situation with McAllister. After that, our relationship improved significantly. I'd forgiven Anna's earlier behavior, reasoning that we hadn't been fully committed at the time. Now, we were. Anna was affectionate, fun, and sexually adventurous. She was also beautiful, and I loved being seen with her in public. As time went on, Anna started hinting about our future together, which I had been thinking about too. I felt torn. On one hand, I wondered if she was the right long-term match for me. On the other, I couldn't deny she was every man's fantasy. Eventually, I decided that no one else could compare to Anna, and I proposed to her, surprising her with a Caribbean vacation. She was thrilled, calling her mom and Sally to share the news. When I told my parents, they were happy for me, though my dad sounded a bit hesitant. The resort was incredible, with pools, bars, restaurants, and a private beach. On our first day, Anna wore a revealing bikini, drawing plenty of attention. We enjoyed drinks and a walk on the beach, then headed back for a casual meal. Afterward, slightly tipsy, we watched the sunset from our balcony where things quickly turned close. It was amazing. The resort staff were very attentive, always available to provide towels, directions, or anything else we needed. The beach boys, young men in their early 20s, catered to the guests on the lounge chairs, mostly working for tips. Their main customers were women in their 40s who enjoyed the attention. They would bring drinks, towels, move chairs, or even apply sunscreen if asked. Naturally, Anna in her skimpy bikinis caught their eye. Cruz, one of the beach boys with golden skin, a lean build, and a bright smile, was often nearby. One day, I suggested a jet ski ride, but Anna wanted to work on her tan, so I arranged an hour session on my own. After having fun on the ocean, I returned to find Cruz massaging Anna's bare back. It even seemed like he might have been touching more than just her back. "What's going on here?" I asked. Cruz quickly stood up. "I didn't want Miss Anna to get sunburned, so I was applying sunscreen," he stammered. "I'll handle it, thanks," I said, and he hurried away. "Anna, what was that about?" I asked quietly, but firmly, not wanting to cause a scene. "What do you mean?" she replied. "Your top is undone, and this guy had free access to your body. Was he feeling you up?" "Oh, relax," she said. "He might have touched the sides a bit, but my body is only for you." I pushed aside the incident with Cruz and focused on being with Anna. Soon after, I suggested a siesta, which she knew meant more. I had to carry a towel to hide my arousal as we walked back to our room. Eventually, the vacation ended, and we discussed wedding plans on the flight home. While Anna dozed, I reflected on the great trip, though I couldn't fully forget Cruz and his hands on her. After the weekend, Trent stopped by, and life returned to normal. Work was busy and rewarding, and I was building a nice nest egg. Anna still worked at Lucas, mainly lunch shifts, allowing us to spend most evenings together. She didn't need to work but enjoyed having her own money. As summer began, Anna and Sally planned the next couple's gathering after the Truth or Dare party. I hoped these parties would fade out, but they decided the next one would be at Trent and Jackie's in mid-July, a pool party. When I heard this, I immediately told Anna, "None of the bikinis from the Caribbean." "I'll wear the red one," she suggested. "No way," I insisted. "Strangers seeing you like that is one thing, but not our friends." She didn't argue, and I thought the issue was settled. However, on the Tuesday before the party, I got a call from my mom. My dad had a heart attack and needed bypass surgery. I rushed home with Anna, who held my hand to calm me on the way to the hospital. I worried about both my dad and how my mom would handle things without his steady presence. When we arrived, we found out the surgery was successful, and Dad was expected to make a full recovery. I stayed with him that night while Anna and my mom went home to rest. The next day, Dad was in good spirits, solving a crossword puzzle. We spent the day at the hospital, but it was uneventful. I could tell Anna was bored, so I suggested she head back home. Anna hesitated, but eventually agreed to leave that afternoon. Thursday was spent helping my parents get settled. I watched baseball with Dad, and we admitted it was boring but necessary. On Friday, I called Anna. She asked when I'd be home, and I told her not until Sunday at the earliest. She reminded me about the party, which I had forgotten. I apologized and asked if she still planned to go. She wasn't sure, but mentioned Sally and Jackie's sister were pressuring her. Saturday came, and Dad seemed exhausted. I suggested he rest while I helped Mom around the house. I spent several hours setting up storage racks in the basement until Mom called me for dinner. I joined her at the table. "Dad's already asleep," she said softly. "Good, he needs the rest." I nodded. After dinner, I returned to organizing the storage shelves, losing track of time until I realized it was nearly 10 p.m. "I need to call Anna," I muttered, dialing her number. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked when she answered. There was noise in the background. "Hi, honey, I'm at Trent and Jackie's. We're having a great time," she replied, sounding distracted. "That's right, the party is tonight," I remembered. "How's my dad?" There was a pause. Then I heard a high-pitched scream and giggling. "What's going on?" I asked, growing concerned. "What, honey?" She laughed, clearly enjoying herself. "How much have you had to drink?" I asked, feeling uneasy. "The connection isn't great," she said, her voice cutting in and out. "Can I call you back?" "I'll call you back," I said, frustrated. But before I could hang up, the line stayed open. Suddenly, I heard Trent's voice clearly say, "Get that top off, too," followed by laughter. I thought I heard Anna's voice, but it was unclear. Then the call disconnected. It was obvious they weren't just playing games. What the hell is going on? I wondered aloud, too tired to drive home, but needing answers. I decided to call Henry Anderson, an old neighbor. "Hey, Henry, can you do me a favor? Take some photos of what's happening at Trent and Jackie's. I need to know what's going on." "On it," Henry replied. I gave him directions, explaining where to position himself to capture their backyard. "Thanks, man," I said, relieved. I finished my work, turned off my phone, and went to bed, too exhausted to think. The next morning, I found several photos from Henry waiting for me. They were worse than I imagined. Photo 1, Anna completely unclothed with Trent. Photo 2, Carl unclothed, grabbing Anna. Photo 3, Anna and Sally, both unclothed, dancing for Trent and Carl. Photo 4, Trent having sex with Anna, I muttered as I scrolled through them. This is irrefutable proof of Anna's infidelity, I thought, feeling numb. I need to end this marriage, protect my assets, and get back at Trent and Carl. Around noon, Anna called, sounding affectionate. "I miss you. How's your dad? When are you coming home? I really need you," she said. I nearly confronted her but held back. "I'm going to find a way to get even," I decided. "I just need a plan." "Dad's taken a turn for the worse," I lied. "I need to stay another week." "Oh, no," she said, concerned. "Do you need me to come up?" "No, it's best if you don't. Dad can't handle the excitement," I replied. That Monday night, I left for the city and called my old roommate Julian to see if I could stay with him for a few days. "Sure, JT," he said, surprised but accommodating. When I arrived, he mentioned his brother was visiting from New York on Thursday. "He's thinking about changing careers," Julian explained. "Interesting," I replied, before telling him everything that had happened and showing him the photos. Julian was shocked. "I knew Anna was flirty, but I didn't think she'd cheat," he said. "I want to get even with Anna and the whole group," I admitted, "but I need to keep this from Anna until I have a plan." Julian nodded. "I won't say a word." The next day, I waited outside Carl's building. When I saw him heading to his truck, I waved. "Carl, let's grab a beer," I suggested. He was surprised, but agreed. We went to a nearby tavern with few patrons. After ordering beers, I leaned in. "What happened Saturday night?" I asked. "Just another typical party," Carl shrugged. "This is typical?" I asked, showing him one of Henry's photos. "Hey, man, the girls took their clothes off. It didn't mean anything," Carl said, trying to downplay it. "Okay, no big deal," I said, then leaned in closer. "But what do you think your boss would say about this?" Carl froze, knowing his boss was very religious and that he was desperate for a promotion. He stood to leave, but I shoved him back into his seat. "Sit down and shut up," I ordered. "I have questions, and unless you want your boss to see these photos, you're going to tell me everything." Carl looked desperate. Okay, he agreed. We sat for over an hour as he told me about Anna. Anna and Sally were in the poorer group in high school, he explained. The wealthier kids teased them for their outdated clothes and old cars, but they knew their looks gave them an edge. Anna was beautiful, and Sally had a large chest which made them popular, Carl continued, his tone a mix of resignation and bitterness. By 15, they both had boyfriends and probably lost their pureness around then. I clenched my fists but stayed silent, letting him talk. Later in high school, after several short relationships, Sally told me about a conversation with Anna. Anna said, "All I want are nice clothes, a nice car, and a nice house. I like Zex, so I don't mind trading it for material things. I'll find a man who can give me that. The wealthier, the better." My stomach turned as Carl spoke. "So, she's always been like this?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Yeah," Carl nodded. "When you two started dating, she had a boyfriend. She told Sally she thought you had better prospects, so she dated you while still seeing the other guy for about 3 months. I felt a surge of anger. "So she was with both of us at the same time?" I asked, my voice rising. "Yeah," Carl said, sipping his beer. "And since you've been married, I know of at least 2 other guys she's been with." I almost choked on my drink. "Who?" I demanded. Carl shrugged. "I don't know all the details, but one was a guy named McCallum or something. She said you knew him." My mind immediately pictured McAllister, the guy we met at a party before we got married. I sat there fuming, while Carl casually drank his beer, unfazed by the bombshell he had just dropped. "So if someone wealthier with a nicer car and house came along, Anna would leave me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Yeah, she would," Carl confirmed without hesitation. I sat in silence, processing everything. Finally, I asked, "What happened on Saturday? Was Jackie involved?" Carl shook his head. "No, Jackie left early because her sister's boyfriend got into a fight. That's when the rest of the group started." "So Jackie doesn't know what happened?" I asked, feeling slightly relieved. "No, and don't tell her," Carl insisted. I nodded, then asked, "Does it bother you that Sally's with other guys?" Carl snorted. "Wife? We're not married. Sally calls me her husband, but we've never been married. I care about her, but marriage? Not with her. That's why we don't have kids." It was time to go. I had a lot to think about. Anna wasn't just promiscuous. She was with me for financial security and would leave if a better option appeared. Only Carl knew what I knew, and it would stay that way for now. Even Carl, as clueless as he seemed, was smarter than me about women. Back at Julian's place, I told him everything Carl had shared. Sadness quickly turned to anger, and I felt embarrassed. How many people had laughed at me behind my back? Julian asked a few questions, then plugged into his headphones and started working on his laptop. I sat there drinking wine and getting angrier. After a while, Julian unplugged and asked, "Has she ever met John Paul?" "No," I replied, confused. "I haven't seen him since college. Why?" Julian just shook his head and plugged back in. A few minutes later, he looked up with a sly smile. "Can you get $30,000 quickly?" he asked. "Yes, but why?" I asked, intrigued, but cautious. "And I need you to lease a BMW for 6 months if this works," he added, typing rapidly. "Why?" I asked again, more curious. Julian leaned back, grinning. "I have a plan. It'll cost you $30,000 in a BMW lease, but it'll be worth it." I listened as Julian explained. "Go home to Anna tomorrow and act normal. Come back here on Thursday after work. John Paul will be here." The next day I called Anna and said, "I'll be home tonight." I did my best to act normal, blaming any odd behavior on worrying about my dad. Either I was a better actor than I thought, or she just didn't pay much attention. Thursday night, I met Julian and John Paul at Julian's condo. After some pleasantries, Julian laid out the plan. John Paul would seduce Anna, posing as a wealthy New York investment banker, and get her to fall for him. John Paul has 5 months before his play starts, so he has to pull this off by then, Julian explained. John Paul, a good-looking guy with a magnetic smile, looked at me seriously. "Are you okay if I sleep with her? I mean, she is your wife." I stared at him, feeling detached. "I don't care. After 5 months, you'll probably be having sex within days." With that, we started planning. I gave them Anna's work schedule and emphasized the need for secrecy. The week passed without incident. I watched for any change in Anna, but she seemed normal. Yes, we had sex, but it felt routine, fulfilling yet exhausting. On Thursday night, we met at Julian's condo again. I was eager for an update, torn between wanting Anna to fall for John Paul and hoping she wouldn't. John Paul began, "I've been to Lucas 3 times. First, I made sure she noticed me. Second, we had some light conversation. Third, we exchanged names. She said she works 11 to 3, he continued. Tomorrow, I'll show up at 2 for a late lunch and coffee with her. I had to buy a $1,200 suit to play the part. The next week passed uneventfully, though I couldn't stop thinking about what was happening between Anna and John Paul. One afternoon, I noticed Anna was home late and wondered why. It felt like waiting for the next episode of a favorite TV show. I was eager to hear the latest update on Thursday night. John Paul began his report with a grin. We had coffee on Friday. Anna mentioned she's married but hinted at problems making herself seem available. We set a lunch date for Tuesday. He explained that he subtly hinted at his wealth, revealing it gradually. Meanwhile, I started noticing Anna becoming cooler towards me, which was a good sign. On the day of their lunch date, I got home after 5, but Anna wasn't there. After a run, I came back and she still hadn't arrived. As I was making dinner, she finally walked in. "Hi, honey, how was your day?" I asked, curious about her response. "Oh, I ended up working late," she replied, trying to sound casual. I knew she hadn't worked, but I played along. We were drifting apart, and I let it happen. The sex was still good, but it felt more physical than emotional, making it easy to fake. I made things easier for her. "Dad needs some help," I said. "I have to leave Friday afternoon." "Should I come with you?" she asked, but her offer was half-hearted. "No, it's fine," I replied. "I'm just helping out and staying through next week to meet clients." Thursday night, John Paul told me their lunch date had turned into a kissing session. "She mentioned you'd be out of town, so we made plans for Friday night," he said with a confident smile. "She's definitely interested." I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and satisfaction that the plan was working. It was like pulling the strings, and everything was unfolding as I intended. But a small part of me still couldn't believe this was really happening. As the weeks passed, Anna and John Paul's relationship progressed as expected. By the weekend, I was certain they had slept together. I stayed at my parents' house, conveniently out of the way while she was with him. No surprise there. At home, Anna began to pull away from me. It was bittersweet, but necessary. Occasionally, I'd see glimpses of the woman I once loved, which made me sad, but those moments were brief. After about 3 months, John Paul started expressing his love to Anna, asking for a commitment. By then, she was fully convinced he was a wealthy New York investment banker with a pricey Manhattan apartment. "When she talks about you, it's clear she's moved on," John Paul reported one evening. "She said the relationship is over, but hasn't had that conversation with you yet." A few weeks later, Anna casually asked, "Sally and I are planning a spa weekend in California. Is that okay?" I knew John Paul had invited her to Sun Valley for the weekend. "Sure, have fun," I said, pretending not to know. That night, she was unusually affectionate, almost as if trying to compensate for something. I couldn't help but think about how clueless she was about what was really happening. John Paul planned to propose during the Idaho trip with a $500 cubic zirconium ring that looked convincingly real. Anna wouldn't suspect a thing. At our Thursday meeting, John Paul reported, "She accepted the proposal," showing me a photo of Anna beaming with the ring. "She said she'll talk to you about leaving this week." This was the moment I had been waiting for. My plan was to act devastated, fight her on it, and drag out the process just long enough to make her desperate for a quick exit, ensuring she'd agree to my terms and protect my assets. When Anna finally approached me, she was hesitant. "JT, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. I looked up, pretending to be clueless. "What's wrong?" She took a deep breath. "I think it's time for us to separate. I've met someone else, and I want to be with him." I acted shocked, my voice trembling. "What? We're married, Anna. I can't believe this." She avoided my gaze. "I'm sorry, JT, but it's over. I need to move on." I switched from shock to anger. "I won't let you leave," I shouted. "We need counseling to work this out." She was surprised by my reaction, but I could see she was eager to end things quickly, which was exactly what I was counting on. A few days later, she came home with a document, placing it on the table between us. "This is what I'm suggesting," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'll give up any claim to your assets, our house, your vehicle, everything. All I ask for is an immediate divorce." I put on the performance of a lifetime, pretending to be utterly shattered. "I can't believe you're doing this," I whispered, my eyes red from fake tears summoned with a few drops of Visine. "But if this is really what you want..." I signed the papers with a trembling hand, making sure to maintain the act until the very end. As she took the documents and left, I couldn't help but notice a spring in her step. She thought she was about to start a new life with a wealthy man in New York. But in reality, she was walking into the final stage of the plan. It was mid-September, and our divorce would be finalized on October 5th. Anna had relinquished any interest in my assets and believed she'd be moving to New York and married by the end of October. We met at Julian's that Thursday to finalize the plan. John Paul would stay at the rented condo for the next 2 weeks, maintaining the charade. On the Friday they were supposed to leave for New York, Anna would return to our house to gather her clothes and belongings. John Paul would tell her he'd meet her there with a moving truck, but of course, he'd never show up. By the time she realized what was happening, John Paul would be gone, and so would her dreams of a new life. John Paul told her his last name was Taylor, Julian explained, a smirk on his face. She'll have a hard time finding him, and it'll be expensive. She'll be close to broke. John Paul nodded, a bit of sympathy in his eyes. This is pretty harsh, man, he said to me. Are you sure about this? I met his gaze without hesitation. Not nearly as harsh as what she did to me, I replied coldly. I get it, he said, sighing. But I'll miss that piece of meat. She was as good as it gets. I sighed too. Yeah, I'll miss it too, I admitted, though the truth was I was more than ready to move on. In the weeks that followed, my interactions with Anna were polite, but distant. I had to fake remorse a few times, but I never asked her to reconsider staying with me. I was afraid she might say yes. On the Friday she was supposed to leave, I met her at the house as she packed up her things. Part of me considered trying to get one last session in bed, but I knew it was over. She was dressed up, clearly thinking she was about to begin a new chapter of her life. Do you need any help with the packing? I offered, keeping my voice neutral. No, I'm fine, she said with a smile, eager to be done with this part of her life. By 12:30 p.m., she made her first call to John Paul. I watched her expression change from confusion to frustration as the call didn't go through. The number's been disconnected, she muttered, redialing. She turned to me, her face pale. Can I use your phone? She asked. Sure, I said, handing it to her, watching as she tried again, only to get the same result. She called the luxury condo where John Paul had been staying, but they told her the condo had been paid through Saturday and was now available for rent again. Panic began to set in. I'm going to drive back to the condo and see what's going on, she said, her voice trembling. Can I leave my stuff here for now? Of course, I replied, keeping my tone calm. Take your time. She left in a hurry, and I didn't hear from her the rest of the weekend. I knew exactly what she was going through: confusion, panic, and eventually the realization that she had been played. While she was dealing with that, I set phase 2 of the plan into motion. I sent out 3 packets containing photos from the Zex party she had participated in while I was with my dad. In the photos, Trent, Sally, Carl, and Anna were all clearly identifiable, faces and bodies fully exposed. Packet 1 went to Carl's deeply religious boss with a note that read, I believe a man's moral character is reflected in the quality of the work they do. Don't you? Packet 2 was sent to Trent's ex-wife with a note that said, look at what your ex is up to. Thank goodness the children are with you. Packet 3 went to Jackie with a note that said, I guess you and I missed the best part yet. Sorry to bring you this news, but you deserve to know. Once things calm down, would you like to get a drink? I signed all the notes with my name and phone number. I had one more bit of unfinished business, McAllister. I considered asking Julian to come up with something for him, too. Of course, Anna eventually tried to rekindle our relationship. She showed up the following Monday night as if she were just getting home from work. Hi, honey. Sorry about our little misunderstanding, she said with a forced smile. I'm home for good. I stared at her coldly. Anna, you destroyed my life, I said, my voice filled with contempt. This is not your home. You were planning to run off with someone to New York, remember? No, I've changed my mind, she insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. It's you I want. I was done acting. Forget it, I said bluntly. Get the hell out of here and never come back. She resorted to her old tactics, quickly stripping off her top and unhooking her bra, trying to seduce me like she had done countless times before. But I was done. As I shut the door in her face, I said, Say hi to John Paul for me. I glanced out the window and saw her standing there, a blank expression on her face as she tried to figure out the meaning behind my mention of John Paul. In all our conversations, his real name had always been kept secret. She was starting to understand just how thoroughly she had been deceived. As I took one last look, I noticed Henry Anderson leaning over the fence, getting an eyeful of Anna standing there bare-chested. I chuckled to myself. Last I heard, Anna was living with Sally. I'm sure she'll be auditioning for the next guy who isn't thinking with the right body part. As for Carl, not only did he not get the promotion, but I also heard he was fired. He left town shortly after, abandoning Sally. Trent was another story. When he went to court for the custody hearing, he was soundly denied and lost even more visitation rights. Apparently, the photos played a significant role in that decision. One Saturday night, I got a frantic call from Jackie. "Trent's coming to your house," she said, her voice trembling. "He's drunk and has a weapon. He knows you sent those photos." I quickly snuck out to the backyard, grabbing some blankets and pillows. I made a fake body under the blankets on the chaise lounge, leaving a small light on to lure him. I hid in the thick bushes on the other side of the privacy screen, armed with a baseball bat. Even if Jackie hadn't called, I would have heard him coming. Trent pounded on the front door, and when I didn't answer, he came through the gate into the backyard. He immediately spotted the lounge chair setup and crept over, firing twice into the blankets. The first swing of the bat broke his arm, and he dropped the weapon, howling in pain. I swung again, aiming for his lap, determined to neutralize that particular threat too. Then I called the police. With the weapon and shots fired, there wasn't much investigation needed. I was defending myself, and Trent was facing attempted liquidation charges. I called Jackie to thank her for the warning. "You're welcome," she said, her voice still shaky. "Now about that drink you mentioned." I had always thought of our marriage as steady, if not perfect. Chrissy and I met during college at a campus fundraiser where she volunteered tirelessly, impressing everyone with her unyielding optimism. Her kindness was magnetic, drawing me in. I never imagined that years later, the same open heart that made me fall in love with her could also be a double-edged sword. When our first child was born, we faced the typical struggles of young parents: sleepless nights, endless bills, and the balancing act between work and home. But Chrissy seemed tireless. She'd pack lunches, attend PTA meetings, and still find time to work part-time as a nurse. I tried to support her as best as I could, but the demands of my job at the dealership often left me exhausted and unavailable. Over time, cracks began to show. Chrissy became more distant, retreating into her role as a caregiver not just for our kids, but for anyone who needed her. I admired her compassion, but felt it often came at the expense of our relationship. Conversations became shorter, dates were rare, and the laughter that once filled our home seemed to fade into the background. 2 years ago, I noticed a subtle change. Chrissy began staying late after her shifts, claiming she needed to help patients or finish paperwork. At first, I didn't think much of it. She had always been dedicated to her work. But when she started coming home with a faraway look in her eyes, I began to worry. I tried to address it several times, suggesting we go to counseling or take a weekend getaway to reconnect. But each time, Chrissy brushed me off with the same excuse. "It's just a busy time at work. Things will settle soon." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I sensed something wasn't right. The tipping point came a week ago when Chrissy mentioned a friend from work, a young man named Bruce who had recently lost his wife. She spoke about him with a warmth that felt out of place, even for her. I chalked it up to her natural empathy, but a gnawing doubt lingered. It wasn't until last night's revelation that my suspicions were confirmed, and my world came crashing down. I awoke with a throbbing pain in my head and dragged myself into the bathroom, fumbling for some painkillers. My stomach churned violently, forcing me to linger near the toilet. As I crouched there, vivid recollections of the prior day flooded back with an intensity that left me breathless. My name is Ron Jameson, and yesterday, my wife Chrissy unraveled my entire world with a devastating confession. When I returned home from work, Chrissy admitted she'd been involved with another man for a year and had developed deep feelings for him, though she claimed her love for me remained. It began, she said, as an attempt to provide solace after the loss of his wife in a tragic accident. Over time, their bond grew stronger, culminating in a deeply passionate relationship. Despite this, Chrissy assured me she wasn't leaving permanently. She planned to stay with him only as long as he needed her, all while maintaining her role as a wife and mother. She said he was younger and would eventually move on, but until then, she felt obligated to support him. Shocked and furious, I lashed out, calling her names I'm not proud of. Chrissy shot back, accusing me of failing to honor our wedding vows and insisting that if I truly loved her, I'd accept the situation. Angry and devastated, I turned to booze to cope. Once I calmed down enough to think, I asked how she'd feel if I found someone else. Her reply stung. Who'd want you? She called me an overweight, balding, middle-aged man and warned me that divorce would ruin me financially and emotionally. Enraged, I drank and yelled until she packed a bag and left for her lover's house. The next morning, I forced myself to take stock of my life. Chrissy wasn't wrong about my appearance. I was out of shape, middle-aged, and losing my hair. While I couldn't change my age, I could at least work on my health. But first, I needed to figure out where my kids were. I searched the house, but didn't find them. Just as I was about to call Chrissy's parents, her car pulled into the driveway. The kids got out and walked toward the house. At the door, Chrissy greeted me with a cutting comment about my sobriety. When I demanded to know where the kids had been, she casually mentioned they'd stayed at her lover's house. Furious, I asked why she didn't take them to her parents instead, but she said they weren't home. Dismissing my outrage, she brushed past me and headed upstairs. Are you staying here or are you going back to him? I asked. She sighed, clearly annoyed. Ron, stop acting like a child. I've already explained this. I love you, but I'm staying with him until he no longer needs me. Trying to stay calm, I asked, and what about the kids? If you don't want to take care of them, call my parents, she replied before packing another bag and leaving. I stood there, head pounding, trying to hold myself together for the kids, but I wasn't going to let her betrayal slide. I still had my dignity. After she left, I checked on the kids and asked about their homework. They groaned, but got to work when I promised we'd visit their grandparents afterward. The kids loved going to Chrissy's parents' farm, where their grandfather Sam was helping them build go-karts. Sam, a retired handyman with a fully stocked workshop, was more than just a grandparent. He was a mentor. While the kids worked, I reflected on how much they meant to me. Ronren, 16, was dedicated to football, though he wasn't big enough for a scholarship. Sally, 15, loved to test boundaries, but excelled in school. Kyle, 11, was our surprise baby and Chrissy's little one, though he hated the nickname. His cheerful spirit was a bright spot in an otherwise dark time. I made coffee and started a to-do list. My first call was to my boss, Bob Clarkson. I've worked at the local Ford dealership for 23 years, with Bob as my boss for the last 15. I explained what had happened, and he immediately offered his support. Bob shared a story about his son's messy divorce, which involved false accusations and intervention from his ex-mother-in-law, who ultimately saved the day by threatening to testify against her own daughter. That's harsh, I said, shocked. Harsh doesn't cover it, Bob replied, but she saved my son's life. He told me to take all the time I needed, and I requested a week off. With plenty of personal days and vacation time banked, he approved it without hesitation, offering additional support if necessary. Before ending the call, I asked Bob if he could recommend a good divorce lawyer. Without hesitation, he suggested Dwight Tucker, an attorney who had won primary custody for his son and even secured child support payments from the ex-wife. Tucker's ruthless, Bob said. If you need someone who will fight tooth and nail, he's your guy. With a clearer plan beginning to form, I felt a faint sense of control, though I knew the road ahead would be anything but smooth. After rummaging for a moment, Bob found Dwight Tucker's business card and read out the number. I decided to call right away, even though it was a Saturday, and I assumed I'd just leave a voicemail. To my surprise, luck was on my side. Tucker's secretary answered and said he'd had a last-minute cancellation. If you can be here in 30 minutes, he'll see you, she told me. I quickly told the kids to behave while I stepped out for an hour and drove to Tucker's office, making it there in under 20 minutes. Dwight Tucker turned out to be a sharp-looking man in his mid-30s. A bit shorter than me, he had piercing blue eyes and a warm, confident smile that likely worked wonders with juries, especially female jurors. "What brings you in today?" he asked once I'd settled into a chair across from him. Taking a deep breath, I started. "Yesterday, my wife told me she's been cheating on me with a younger man." My face flushed as I spoke, anger and humiliation battling for dominance. I recounted the events of the previous day as briefly as I could. Tucker listened carefully, jotting down notes and occasionally shaking his head. When I got to the part where Chrissy claimed she still loved me but was determined to continue her affair, he raised a hand to stop me. "Let me get this straight," he said, his expression darkening. "She says she loves you, but plans to keep sleeping with this guy?" Embarrassed, I nodded, my face burning. "Go on," he prompted, leaning forward slightly. I explained how Chrissy had blown up at me for refusing to accept her arrangement and how I'd insulted her in my anger. I admitted I'd called her degrading names and shared how she'd laughed when I suggested finding someone else. The hardest part to relay was how she had cruelly belittled me, calling me undesirable and threatening to ruin me if I pursued a divorce. "She actually said that?" Tucker asked, incredulous. "No offense, Mr. Fremont, but your wife either has a heart of stone or she's got some serious issues." "None taken," I sighed, nodding. "I've been wondering the same thing." I went on to tell him how Chrissy had left our kids at her lover's house after our argument and allowed them to spend the night there. Tucker's pen paused mid-note, and he glanced up with a slight smile before jotting something down. "Now, the big question," he said, folding his hands in front of him. "What do you want to do?" I took a moment to think, staring at the floor. Finally, I said, "I can't live like this. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive her, but I do know I can't let her destroy me or take my kids." Tucker nodded sympathetically. "Unfortunately, that's a common pattern with people in her situation. But here's the good news. I'll work tirelessly to protect your rights and minimize the damage. If this does go to divorce, you'll get at least half of your shared assets. That said, I need to warn you, the courts typically don't care about infidelity." Hearing this, my heart sank. "So, I'll still have to pay alimony and child support?" "That's possible," Tucker admitted. "But that's why we need to act fast and aggressively. Right now, your wife has left the marital home, and even worse, she took your kids to stay at her lover's house. Judges don't look kindly on that kind of behavior. You currently have custody and will fight to keep it that way. If you're granted primary custody, you won't have to pay child support. By the way, does your wife work?" "She does," I said. "Part-time at the hospital. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Honestly, that's probably where she met this guy." Tucker nodded thoughtfully. "How much does she make?" "About $25,000 a year," I replied. "I make around $80,000. Tucker paused, his gaze serious. "I need you to think carefully about this next question. Do you still love her? Do you want to try and save the marriage?" I looked down, staring at the floor for a long moment. When I finally raised my head, tears were streaming down my face. "Yes," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I do love her, but I can't live with what she's done. She's humiliated me and broken our vows. I'm done. I just want a divorce." "Understood," Tucker said, flipping to a clean page in his notebook. "Now let's go over your assets. Tell me as much as you can about what you and your wife own." I took a moment to mentally list everything we owned. "We've got about $3,500 in our checking account," I started. "There's $44,000 in savings, plus a CD worth $20,000, not counting interest. My 401k has around $150,000, and Chrissy's retirement fund is a bit smaller since she hasn't worked as long as I have. However, the hospital where she worked full-time offered a better benefits package back then. Surprisingly, though, my company's health plan is better, so that's what we use for the family." I paused before adding, "We also have 2 cars, both jointly owned, and then there's the house. We bought it just a few years ago with a maxed-out loan, so there's not much equity yet." Dwight nodded, his expression shifting to one of focused determination. "Here's what I want you to do," he said, his tone all business. "Withdraw half of the money from your checking and savings accounts and deposit it into a new account under your name only." "I can't touch the CD," I pointed out. "It's in both our names, and cashing it requires Chrissy's signature." "That's fine," Dwight replied, quickly calculating figures. "Take $33,750 from savings. Use what's left in checking to pay as many household bills as you can. Cancel any joint credit cards, pay off their balances, and then apply for a credit card in just your name." "I still have an individual card I opened before we got married," I told him. "I rarely use it because our joint card has cashback rewards." "Perfect," Dwight said with a small smile. "That makes things even easier for you." He scribbled a list of steps on a notepad and handed it to me. "Before you leave, stop by my secretary's desk and have her call Taylor Locksmith to change the locks at your house. Once that's handled, come back in, and I'll go over the next steps with you." Miss Carlson called Taylor Locksmith while I waited. After giving them my address, they told me someone would arrive by noon. With that arranged, I returned to Dwight's office where he was just finishing a phone call. "Good news," he said, hanging up. "If I fax the paperwork today, we'll get Judge Johnson assigned to your case." "Why is that good news?" I asked, puzzled. Dwight grinned. Judge Johnson can't stand cheaters. He's old school, a true Bible Belt judge, and he doesn't tolerate infidelity, no matter which spouse is at fault. That gives us a significant advantage. Plus, he was a close friend of my father's, so he won't mind if I give him a call at home. Dwight stood and extended his hand, which I shook gratefully. Before heading home, handle the banking, Dwight instructed. I'll draft a petition for an emergency restraining order against your wife. If granted, it'll bar her from the house and keep her 500 feet away from you and the kids. The fact that she left the children with her lover will strengthen our case. Even if the order is eventually dismissed, it'll give you time to establish yourself as the primary caregiver at home. By Friday, we'll have her served with divorce papers. Then, we'll see how she responds. For the first time since Chrissy's bombshell revelation, I felt a glimmer of control and dignity returning. The bank wasn't busy, so I quickly withdrew my share of the funds as a cashier's check and closed our joint credit card. The remaining balance was $537, which I paid off using the checking account. I also paid 2 months of mortgage payments in advance, using another $2,600. By the time I finished, there wasn't much left in the account. I deposited the cashier's check into a new checking and savings account under my name at a different bank. With that task completed, I drove home to find the kids glued to the television. "Come on, let's head to your grandparents' house," I told them, and we piled into the car. When we arrived at my in-laws' farm, Sam was coming around the corner from his workshop. He waved before disappearing back inside, and the kids eagerly followed him. Inside the house, Mary greeted me warmly, giving me a kiss on the cheek. A moment later, Sam joined us, freshly washed up and ready to chat. "I need to tell you something difficult," I began, struggling to find the words. "Chrissy is having an affair, and I've decided to file for divorce." Sam's face hardened with disbelief. "That's not true," he snapped. "Chrissy wouldn't do something like that. What proof do you have?" "She told me herself," I said quietly, tears welling up in my eyes. Just then, the back door creaked open and the kids came bursting in from outside. "Stay outside for a few more minutes," I told them firmly. "Why?" Ron asked, his tone defiant. "Because I said so," I replied, sharper than I intended. He must have noticed the tears on my face because he quickly turned, ushering his siblings back outside. "Chrissy actually admitted this?" Mary asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," I confirmed, my tone resolute. "And there's more." I recounted everything. Chrissy's confession about her affair, her cruel comments about me, her threats to ruin me if I sought a divorce, and even her boast about enjoying closeness with her lover. Both Mary and Sam were stunned, and Sam's expression darkened with anger. "I still can't believe this," he muttered. "I'm going to call her right now and put it on speaker." After dialing his daughter's number, Sam placed the phone on speaker and set it on the coffee table. "Hi, Dad," Chrissy greeted him warmly. "What's going on?" "Ron's here with me," Sam began, his tone serious. Then, without preamble, he asked, "Are you having an affair?" The line went silent for several seconds. Then Chrissy's voice, sharp and defensive, broke the tension. "What did he say?" "He told me you're involved with another man," Sam replied evenly. "That you've been intimate with him and that you claim to love him." "It's not what you think, Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm trying to help someone. He's been through a terrible loss, and I can't just abandon him." Sam's face flushed a deep red, his jaw tightening. "Answer the question, Chrissy," he said through gritted teeth. "Are you sleeping with him?" "Yes," she admitted softly. "But I love Ron too. I can't walk away from this other man. I care about him deeply." I was floored. Sam had always treated Chrissy as his golden child. I never expected him to call her out on her behavior. "Chrissy," Sam said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "I never thought my daughter would behave like this. I raised you better." "Please, Daddy," she began, but he cut her off by abruptly ending the call. Moments later, the phone started ringing again. Mary reached for it, but Sam shot her a warning look. "Don't answer it!" Ignoring him, Mary picked up the phone anyway. Furious, Sam snatched it out of her hand and hurled it against the fireplace, shattering it. "I said leave it alone!" he roared. Mary stepped back, startled by his sudden rage. I sat frozen, stunned by the raw intensity of the moment. The room fell into a heavy silence as Sam and Mary struggled to process the shocking revelation. After a long pause, Sam turned to me, his face filled with regret, and pulled me into a hug. "Ron, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say. I can't believe Chrissy's done this to you. If there's anything we can do to help, we're here for you and the kids. Anything at all." He glanced at Mary. I'll have her speak to Chrissy later. Right now, I can't. I'm too angry. I nodded, thanked them, and left to meet the locksmith at my house. After loading the kids into the car, I hugged Sam and Mary goodbye and invited them to dinner so we could talk further. On the drive home, Sally's soft sobs broke the silence. Are you and Mom getting divorced? She asked hesitantly. Who told you that? I asked sharply. I did, Ron admitted from the back seat. I went back inside and heard everything. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think it was this. I sighed heavily, struggling to find the right words. Chrissy's betrayal wasn't just breaking me. It was hurting our children, too. She probably hadn't thought about them at all when she chose to have her affair. It looks like your mom and I are heading toward a divorce, I said carefully. But why? Kyle asked, his voice cracking as tears began to fall. Your mom has developed feelings for someone else, I explained gently. You mean she's sleeping with another guy? Sally blurted out, her words laced with anger. I hate her. She's awful. Don't talk about your mother like that, I said, though the words felt hollow. In truth, I shared her anger, but I couldn't let my bitterness spill over onto them. When we arrived home, the locks had just been changed. 10 minutes later, Chrissy pulled into the driveway in a fury. So you ran to my parents, huh? She yelled, storming inside. What did you tell them? That I'm some kind of tramp? Chrissy, I said, my voice low and tired. I told them the truth. And for the record, I do love you. But I will never accept this, sharing you with someone else. You've shattered my trust, my dignity, and everything we built together. Do you even realize how much it hurt when you told me I'm just an unattractive, middle-aged man who should feel lucky to have you? That was cruel. And now you're asking me to live with this? To accept it? That's not love, Chrissy, she faltered, looking shaken by my words. I didn't mean it like that, she stammered. I was just angry when I said those things. And for you to call me names, how could you? I'm your wife, the mother of your children. If you truly loved me, you'd understand. I'm not leaving you for him. I just care about him too. I'm trying to help him. He's younger and going through a rough time. He'll move on eventually. Chrissy, I said, shaking my head slowly. If you're going to talk about love, don't forget the part where you vowed to be faithful. Helping someone doesn't mean sleeping with them. And as for what I said, yes, I've accepted this situation. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I'm done. You're no longer part of my life. That's your reality now. Accept it. Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't muster any sympathy. I had nothing left to give her. Chrissy hesitated, her face flushed and uncertain. For a moment, she seemed vulnerable, but then her expression hardened and a familiar arrogance returned. She inhaled sharply, clearly searching for her next angle. Ron, she began, her voice adopting the patronizing tone she often used with the kids when scolding them. Stop acting like a fool. I'm your wife. You know me. I love you, and I'll come back to you once this man is better. I stared at her, my sadness giving way to something much colder. Whatever love I'd felt for her was gone, replaced by a deep resentment. No, Chrissy, I said quietly but firmly. I don't know you. The woman I married, the mother of my children, was kind, loving, and loyal. You? You're a stranger. For all I know, this isn't even your first affair. How can I believe anything you say? For all I know, you've been sharing yourself with every man who gives you a sob story. Chrissy's face turned crimson with anger, her eyes narrowing as her chest heaved. This is not an affair, she snapped. This is the first time I've slept with anyone since we got married. This man has been through so much, and I'm going to help him, whether you like it or not. Do whatever you want, I replied, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. But don't expect me to accept this. And since I can't trust you anymore, I'll be arranging DNA tests for the kids. I need to know if they're even mine. Her face twisted with rage. You're a complete idiot, she spat. I can see you're determined to turn this into a nightmare. Just remember, I warned you what would happen if you tried to divorce me. Chrissy, I said, shaking my head as I stepped toward the porch. I'd rather lose everything and live in poverty than stay with someone who has no moral compass. Before she could respond, a sheriff's vehicle pulled up, and a deputy stepped out. Are you Chrissy Jameson? He asked, clipboard in hand. Yes, that's me, Chrissy replied, her voice uncertain. Ma'am, the deputy said, holding out a document. This is a restraining order. It prohibits you from entering this house or coming within 500 feet of your husband and children. Do you understand? Chrissy's eyes widened in disbelief. But this is my home. My things are inside. The deputy remained calm. "You'll be allowed 15 minutes to collect personal belongings," he explained. He glanced at me, and I gave him a small nod. "Officer," I said, addressing him directly, "would it be all right if I took my kids to the backyard while she does that?" "I want to see my children," Chrissy exclaimed, her voice desperate. "Ma'am," the deputy said firmly, his tone professional, "the order is meant to protect your children. You'll need to abide by its terms." Chrissy turned on me, her face a mask of fury. "You did this," she shouted. "You're trying to take my children from me." "No, Chrissy," I replied calmly. "You did this to yourself. I simply told the court the truth, that you abandoned your home and left our kids at your lover's house while you were with him." She let out a frustrated scream. "I didn't abandon anyone. He's a wonderful man." "If he's so wonderful," I said with icy sarcasm, "then go be with him. But don't expect any sympathy from me or the court." I took the kids to the backyard and gently explained that their mom was gathering her things to take to her new home. I promised they'd get a chance to see her before she left. When the time came, Kyle burst into tears and ran into Chrissy's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please don't leave, Mommy," he begged. Tears streamed down Chrissy's face as she looked at me. "Ron, can't you see what this is doing to them?" I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "Don't," I said coldly. "You don't get to blame me for this. You were the one who brought them into this mess when you dragged them to your lover's house. You made this choice, not me." "Ron, I can't just abandon him," she cried. "Chrissy," I said, my voice as sharp as ice, "you abandoned your husband, your children, and your home the moment you chose him. You made your decision. Now live with it. Maybe you didn't think about the consequences, but they're here now. I hope it was worth it." Ronran, standing nearby, stared at his mother in disbelief. "Why?" he finally asked. Chrissy fumbled for words, trying to explain herself, but it was obvious he didn't believe her. Before she could say much more, Sally stormed forward. "You're selfish," she hissed, tears streaming down her face. Then, to my shock, she spat at her mother. I grabbed Sally, holding her back before things escalated further. "Apologize," I demanded. "No," Sally said flatly, glaring at her mother. Chrissy looked completely broken, falling to her knees and sobbing uncontrollably. I wasn't entirely surprised by Sally's outburst. She and Chrissy had been clashing a lot lately. Still, I worried that Chrissy's actions might permanently damage their relationship. As I held Sally, Chrissy stood, wiped her tears, and ran to her car. She drove off, pounding the steering wheel in frustration. Kyle tried to chase after her, screaming, "Mommy, don't leave us!" Ronran caught him and brought him back, holding him tightly as he cried. The deputy approached me, his expression somber. "Mr. Jameson," he said softly, "I'm sorry you're going through this." I nodded, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. My family had been shattered, and there was no fixing it now. That evening, Sam and Mary joined us for dinner. I had planned to keep it simple with hamburgers on the grill and a quick salad, but Mary promptly took over the kitchen. She insisted on making her famous meatloaf and macaroni and cheese, a favorite of the kids. While Mary busied herself cooking, Sam and I sat in the living room with a couple of beers. I could see the pain etched on his face. It was clear he was struggling with his daughter's choices. I filled him in on the restraining order and explained that I had filed it because Chrissy had left the kids unsupervised at her lover's house. Sam's shoulders sagged as the weight of the situation bore down on him. "Mary talked to Chrissy about an hour after you left," he said finally, his voice heavy. "How did that go?" I asked, hopeful for some progress. "It was a disaster," Sam admitted. "Mary tried reasoning with her, but Chrissy wouldn't listen. She's convinced she's in the right and that the rest of us are wrong. She even accused us of being horrible people. That's when Mary lost her temper. I've never seen her so angry. The conversation ended with Mary telling Chrissy not to call us again. She also warned her that if this went to court, she'd testify against her." Dinner that night was subdued. The only moment of levity came when Sam invited the kids to work on their go-karts at his shop the next day. Ronran and Kyle perked up at the suggestion, their smiles a welcome sight. Sally, however, remained withdrawn, pushing her food around her plate with a sullen expression. I decided to let it go, knowing she was hurting as much as I was. Later that week, on Friday, Chrissy was served with divorce papers at her workplace. According to friends at the hospital, her reaction was explosive. She reportedly screamed at the process server and vowed to ruin me. The hospital sent her home, though in reality she went to her lover's house. Shortly after, Chrissy hired her own attorney, a woman named Amber Wright. Dwight knew her well, having faced her several times. He described her as overconfident and not nearly as skilled as she believed herself to be. Amber's first move was to attempt to have the restraining order overturned. Judge Johnson, however, was unmoved. "The children are safe where they are," he said, dismissing her arguments. The judge did, however, modify the order slightly, allowing Chrissy supervised visitation at the house. Her boyfriend, however, was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of the property. The judge warned Chrissy that any violation of this rule would result in the revocation of her visitation rights. Chrissy seemed pleased with the modification, but her satisfaction didn't last long. The judge also ordered her to pay child support, an amount significant enough that she'd have to return to full-time work. Despite her outburst at the hospital, I knew they would take her back. Nurses were in short supply, and she was good at her job. Around the same time, the DNA test results arrived in the mail. It took me half the day to work up the courage to open the envelope. When I finally read the report, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief and joy. The results confirmed what I desperately needed to know. The kids were biologically mine. I read the report multiple times to make sure I wasn't mistaken. Then I reflected on what I would have done if the results had been different. In a moment of clarity, I realized it wouldn't have changed my love for them. They were my children, regardless of biology. Still, I knew I couldn't take Chrissy back, even for the kids' sake. Her actions had shattered any chance of reconciliation. I couldn't trust her to set a good example or instill the values our children deserved. I used up all my vacation and personal days to stay home with the kids. When my leave ran out, Sam and Mary stepped in, graciously agreeing to watch them. They remained steadfast in their refusal to speak to Chrissy. She called 3 or 4 times a day for about a week, Sam told me one evening. Eventually, I blocked her number. The visitation schedule was hashed out between our attorneys. Ultimately, Chrissy was allowed to visit the kids on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings from 6 to 7 p.m., with Mary acting as the supervisor. I insisted on being present for the first visit to ensure everyone understood the rules. That Monday, a car pulled up outside, and Chrissy stepped out. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but quickly deduced it must belong to her boyfriend. Chrissy approached the house nervously, attempting a strained smile. "Hi, Ron. How are you?" "Mother, it's nice to see you," she said, trying to sound pleasant. I cut her off sharply. "Chrissy, you need to leave. The judge explicitly stated that your boyfriend isn't allowed within 500 feet of this house." Panic crossed her face. "But he was just dropping me off," she stammered. "Are you completely clueless?" I snapped. "The judge's instructions were crystal clear. Get him out of here now. If he doesn't leave, I'll report it." Chrissy nodded frantically and hurried back to the car. As she spoke to her boyfriend, I stepped outside and noted the license plate number. Once the car drove away, I returned to the porch. "He'll pick me up later," Chrissy said defiantly. "Tell him to wait down the street," I replied curtly. "I don't want him anywhere near this house." Her face turned red, and she glared at me. "Ron, I'm sick of the way you're treating me. You had no right to take money from our account or cancel my credit card." "I didn't take anything that wasn't mine," I said coldly. "The money paid off our shared credit card and 2 months of mortgage payments. I wasn't going to risk losing the house while you were off playing house with your boyfriend. As for the credit card, I wasn't about to be stuck with charges you racked up while gallivanting with him." Chrissy's expression was a mixture of anger and indignation. "This isn't an affair, and he's not my lover," she snapped. "You're just being an—" Before I could say a word, Mary took a decisive step forward and slapped Chrissy across the face. The sharp crack startled both of us, leaving Chrissy wide-eyed and speechless. Chrissy stumbled back, her expression shifting to one of utter disbelief as she stared at her mother. "Chrissy," Mary said sternly, her voice like steel, "if you ever insult Ron again, I swear I'll drag you out of that dress and teach you a lesson you won't forget. The kids are in the living room if you want to see them. I need a moment with Ron and then I'll come in. But listen to me carefully. If you step out of line, I will personally throw you out of this house." Chrissy, looking completely deflated, gave a meek nod and disappeared inside. Mary turned to me with an apologetic look. "Ron, I'm sorry for the way my daughter has behaved. She's acting like she's completely lost her mind." "Thanks for having my back," I said sincerely, grateful for her support. 2 weeks later, as Dwight had predicted, the restraining order was lifted. By then, I had firmly established myself as the primary caregiver, and the court allowed me to remain in the house since Chrissy was still involved with her lover. She was required to continue paying child support, but was now granted unsupervised visitation in public settings. The judge made it clear, however, that Chrissy's boyfriend was not to be present during her time with the kids, nor could she bring them to his home. After months of delays, Our first official court date to finalize the divorce arrived. Before any arguments could begin, Judge Johnson asked if either Chrissy or I had attended counseling. Both attorneys admitted that we had not, so the judge mandated 8 sessions of marital counseling before proceeding. I didn't object, though I thought the sessions would be a waste of time. I had a feeling Chrissy saw them as an opportunity to persuade me, or perhaps the therapist, that her actions were justified. The first session with Ann Patterson, our therapist, went exactly as I expected. Chrissy dominated the hour, attempting to rationalize her behavior as the Christian thing to do. I could barely hide my disbelief as Ann listened with a carefully neutral expression. By the second session, Ann began gently challenging Chrissy's arguments. "Do you think it would be acceptable if Ron decided to start a sexual relationship with another woman?" she asked. I braced myself, expecting Chrissy to attack me. To my surprise, she didn't respond immediately. Her hesitation spoke volumes, but I didn't care about her answer anymore. As the divorce dragged on, I made some significant changes in my life. After Chrissy's hurtful comments about my appearance, I was determined to prove her wrong. I decided to undergo a hair transplant. The procedure wasn't extensive, but it still set me back about $4,000. I was initially apprehensive about the decision, unsure if it was worth the teasing I might endure. But since I was already on leave, I figured it was the right time. The procedure involved buzzing my hair short and transplanting hair from the back of my head to the thinning areas in the front. I spent the first week recovering at home, avoiding the outside world. The kids were curious and asked plenty of questions, to which I offered a vague explanation about a minor medical procedure. Within 10 days, I started looking like myself again, and over the following weeks, the new hair began to fill in naturally. Once I recovered, I committed to getting in shape. At first, running even half a mile left me gasping for air and with aching legs. But I kept at it, gradually increasing my distance until I could run 10 miles without stopping. I joined a gym and completely overhauled our household meals, cutting out junk food like pizza, ice cream, and chips. The kids weren't thrilled at first, grumbling about the absence of their favorite snacks. To win them over, I scoured the internet for fun, healthy recipes. Some dishes flopped spectacularly, but we laughed it off, tossed the disasters in the trash, and made sandwiches instead. It became a family activity, with the kids pitching in to help me cook. Despite the lingering pain of Chrissy's betrayal, these moments brought a sense of warmth and hope back into my life. Returning to work was an unexpected confidence booster. When I checked in at the office, Trudy, the receptionist, gave me a curious look. "Welcome back, Ron," she said brightly. "There's something different about you." I chuckled, a little embarrassed. "I've been working on my fitness. Lost 18 pounds so far, hoping to drop a few more." She smiled warmly. "Well, whatever you're doing, it suits you. If I weren't married, I'd be all over you." I laughed awkwardly. "Thanks for the ego boost, but according to Chrissy, I'm just a washed-up middle-aged guy with no appeal. That's why she found herself a boyfriend." Trudy's expression darkened. "Chrissy must be out of her mind. Ron, you're a great guy. Plenty of women would be lucky to have you. Don't let her words get to you." Her encouragement was the first genuine compliment I'd received in months. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't completely worthless. At our next therapy session, Ann asked Chrissy, "How would you feel if Ron came home and told you he was having an affair?" Chrissy hesitated before replying, "If he was helping her recover from some tragedy, I suppose I'd be okay with it." Ann didn't let up. "And if he said he loved her and that their sexual relationship was fulfilling?" "I'd accept it," Chrissy said, her tone defiant, as long as he made sure the children and I were taken care of. The session continued, with Ann methodically dismantling Chrissy's logic. But no matter how many valid points the therapist made, Chrissy refused to back down. It became clear to me that these sessions weren't about healing. They were just another platform for Chrissy to try to justify her actions. As time passed, the initial shock of Chrissy's betrayal began to fade. It's strange how love works. If it isn't nurtured, it gradually withers away. I found myself caring less and less about what Chrissy thought, focusing instead on the life I was building for myself and my children. By the third week of counseling, Chrissy arrived looking far more subdued. She spoke little during the session, mostly listening as Ann gently and methodically deconstructed her justifications. Something had shifted. It seemed Chrissy was beginning to face the consequences of her actions. I also noticed her sneaking glances at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I had continued working out, lost a few more pounds, and spent a lot of time outside doing yard work, which had given me a deep tan. A few months earlier, before counseling had been ordered, I'd made another big change in my life. I'd grown increasingly dissatisfied with my job. While I loved fixing cars, especially doing bodywork, working at the dealership was wearing me down. Restoring old vehicles had been my passion since I was 14, and I'd become skilled enough to handle any repair. I started thinking about how owning my own shop could give me more time with my kids. I discussed the idea with Sam, who immediately offered his support. He agreed to let me set up a business in his converted barn, which he used as a workshop. The space was perfect, and he even suggested leasing me a section of his land later to build my own facility if things worked out. Setting up the shop wasn't easy. I couldn't quit my job cold turkey, as I didn't have the financial cushion to sustain us until the business turned a profit. Using part of the money I had withdrawn from our joint savings and a small loan from Sam, I began purchasing equipment and tools. Sam even helped me build a paint booth in the barn. I started part-time, working evenings and weekends while keeping my job at the dealership. Word spread quickly, and customers began trickling in. The kids loved hanging around the shop, and I taught Ron how to handle basic repairs. Even Sally pitched in, learning how to change engines and paint cars, something she proudly bragged about to her friends at school. Business grew steadily, and I soon found myself facing a tough decision. One weekend, the dealership asked me to work overtime to help clear a backlog of jobs. I had to decline because I already had commitments to my own clients. I braced myself for the fallout when I approached my boss, Bob, to explain. "Got a minute, Bob?" I asked, stepping into his office. "Sure, Ron," he said, motioning me in. "Glad you're on board this weekend. We've got 44 cars arriving Friday, and they need to be prepped and ready to move by the end of the month." I felt a pang of guilt but pressed on. "That's why I'm here, Bob. I can't work this weekend. I've started my own side business, and I need to honor my commitments to those customers." Bob's face hardened. "If you can't help out, Ron, I might have to let you go." I nodded, resigned. "I understand, Bob. I hope there are no hard feelings. I'm trying to build something for my kids' future and save for their college funds. I'll clean out my locker." Bob sighed. "I hate to lose you, Ron. Tell me about this business of yours. What kind of work are you doing, and where's it set up?" I explained the basics, how I was operating out of Sam's property, the equipment I had, and the types of repairs I could handle, including bodywork. "Grab a coffee and come back," Bob said, reaching for the phone. Instead of coffee, I went to pack up my locker, fully expecting to leave. Losing my job would tighten our finances, but I had faith in the growing success of my shop. I'd already removed Chrissy from my health insurance, so the kids would need to switch to her plan. When I returned, Bob greeted me with a smile and slid a piece of paper across the desk. "I've got an idea, Ron. This is an independent contractor agreement. I need you this weekend, and I think you can convince your customers to wait a few days. If your shop passes inspection, I'll hire you as a contractor to handle our bodywork." I was stunned, but quickly agreed. That weekend, I worked at the dealership while continuing to grow my own business. Within weeks, I was running my shop full-time. Occasionally, I still helped the dealership when they needed an extra hand. Sam joined me part-time, and Mary took over the bookkeeping. For the first time, I was earning more money than I ever had at the dealership. The only thing still in disarray was my marriage. By the fourth counseling session, I was completely over it. I no longer cared about Chrissy's relationship with her boyfriend. Sure, it still hurt to think about her with another man, but those moments were becoming less frequent. Chrissy, however, hadn't given up on trying to justify herself. During one session, Anne asked her directly, "How would you feel if Ron came home and told you he was involved with another woman?" Chrissy hesitated before replying arrogantly, "If he was helping her through a difficult time, I suppose I'd understand." Anne didn't let it drop. "And what if he told you he loved her and that their physical relationship was fulfilling?" Chrissy straightened her shoulders. "As long as he assured me that the children and I would be cared for, I'd accept it." Anne spent the rest of the session picking apart Chrissy's logic, but she refused to budge. These sessions weren't helping. They were just a stage for Chrissy to double down on her beliefs. As time went on, the sting of Chrissy's betrayal began to fade. I realized something about love. It requires attention and care to survive. Without it, even the strongest feelings begin to wither. I poured my energy into my kids, my business, and rebuilding myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward. During our fifth counseling session, I decided to address the most painful thing Chrissy had ever said to me. I wasn't going to hold back any longer. When Anne opened the floor for discussion, I turned to Chrissy, my voice steady but filled with emotion. Chrissy, I've come to realize something about you. You're not just selfish, you're cruel. How could you look at the man you once claimed to love and tell him he's an ugly, middle-aged nobody who could never attract another woman? That hurt me in a way I may never fully recover from. Chrissy's face crumpled and tears spilled down her cheeks. Oh, Ron, I'm so sorry, she cried. I hate myself for saying that. I wish I could take it back. I really do. I love you. Not enough to stop seeing your boyfriend, though, I shot back coldly. Save your apologies. You'll need them more than I will. Chrissy broke into uncontrollable sobbing, and despite Anne's best efforts, we couldn't get her to calm down. Eventually, Anne ended the session and gave us a homework assignment. The assignment included questions like, what is your relationship with your parents like? And how is your bed life? But one question stopped me in my tracks. If you could change one thing about yourself or your relationship, what would it be? That evening, I worked through the questionnaire until I reached that question. I put my pen down, unable to answer it right away. It felt too heavy, too loaded. The next day, after much thought, I finally wrote my response. If I could change one thing, I wish I had been a better husband so my wife wouldn't have fallen out of love with me. At our next session, we handed in our assignments, but Anne didn't review them right away. Instead, she asked if there was anything specific we wanted to discuss. I'd like to ask Chrissy something, I said immediately. Anne nodded, signaling for me to go on. I turned my attention to Chrissy, meeting her gaze directly. Chrissy, I began firmly, I feel like these sessions aren't going anywhere. You've made it abundantly clear you're not leaving your friend, Bruce Hartman. That leaves no path for reconciliation. Why don't we end this charade and move forward with the divorce? Chrissy's eyes widened, her shock unmistakable. How do you know his name? She stammered. I held her gaze, my tone steady. The first time you came to see the kids, I noticed his license plate. It wasn't hard to figure out who he was after that, but his name doesn't matter. I don't care about him, and I'm not out for revenge. I just want to move on with my life. Her expression crumbled, and for a fleeting moment, I saw raw pain in her eyes. The sight hit me harder than I expected, but I resisted the instinct to comfort her. I knew it wouldn't change anything. I also know your lawyer hasn't been happy with my proposed settlement, I said, steering the conversation back on course. So, I've instructed my attorney to offer some alternatives. I'm willing to expand your visitation time with the kids. I'm also offering $1,000 a month in alimony for 3 years. All I want is to be done with this and move on. Chrissy looked utterly devastated, her sadness almost tangible. Yet despite her expression, I knew the truth hadn't changed. She wasn't going to leave Bruce. I had long accepted that I couldn't live with the idea of sharing my wife with another man. It baffled me that she thought I ever could. But none of that mattered anymore. All I wanted was an end to the pain. I've thought a lot about the things you said to me, I added, my voice softer now. And as much as they hurt at the time, I'm starting to move past it. I've made changes to myself. I'm not the man you dismissed so easily when you decided to be with Bruce. In fact, I've started dating. After we finalize this divorce, you're free to devote all your time to him. But I think it's time we end this, for the kids, if nothing else. They deserve a chance to rebuild their relationship with you. Chrissy broke down completely, tears streaming as she fled the room. Anne looked as shocked as I felt. After a moment, she regained her composure and said she wanted to meet with Chrissy alone for the next session, followed by a solo session with me. I agreed with a sigh. Months ago, when Chrissy first dropped her bombshell, I had been consumed by anger and hatred. But now, I just felt drained. This situation wasn't only tearing me apart, it was hurting Chrissy, her parents, and, worst of all, our children. All I wanted was for the pain to stop. By the time I sat down for my final session with Anne, a sense of relief washed over me. I was glad Chrissy wasn't there, and even more grateful that this session marked the end of counseling. Anne began the conversation with a calm but deliberate tone. Ron, I want to commend you for your patience and composure throughout these sessions. I know this situation has been incredibly painful. After meeting with Chrissy last week, I believe I've gained a clearer understanding of what led to her actions. I leaned forward slightly, a mix of curiosity and caution rising within me. Maybe, just maybe, I was about to get some real insight into why Chrissy had destroyed our marriage. Do you remember the homework assignment I gave you? Anne asked, her eyes steady on mine. I nodded, though the memory was vague. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, assuming it hadn't contributed significantly to the process. There was one question in particular that stood out, she continued, pulling 2 sheets of paper from the folder on her lap. It was the one that asked, "If you could change one thing, what would it be?" My brow furrowed slightly as I nodded again, still uncertain of where she was headed. "You wrote that you wished you'd been a better husband so Chrissy wouldn't have stopped loving you," Anne said, her voice measured but empathetic. She paused, letting her words sink in, then added, "When Chrissy read that, she completely broke down. It was the most emotional I've ever seen her, and it took a long time to calm her down. I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed silent." "Ron," Anne said softly, "your wife never stopped loving you." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "That's why she jumped into bed with Bruce, right? Out of love for me?" Anne sighed, clearly disappointed by my tone. "Ron, Chrissy's actions were driven by a severe midlife crisis. As the kids got older, she felt like her purpose was slipping away. Chrissy has always been a nurturing person, and when she met Bruce, a man deeply in need, she confused her longing for purpose and youth with love. That doesn't excuse what she did," I said firmly. "She still chose to betray me. She's not with Bruce anymore," Anne revealed. That caught me off guard. "What? Then why didn't she tell me?" "She believed it wouldn't make a difference," Anne explained. "Bruce left town the same day you told Chrissy you were dating someone and moving forward with the divorce. She assumed she'd already lost you." I thought about that for a moment, but Anne was right. It didn't change anything. Too much had happened, and I was finally on a path that felt right for me. There was no going back. More importantly, I needed Chrissy to focus on rebuilding her bond with the kids. Sally's grades had plummeted, Kyle had become withdrawn, and even Ron, who seemed the most stable, avoided any mention of his mother. "Before we wrap up, there's one more thing I want to share," Anne said, handing me a piece of paper. "This is Chrissy's response to the same question. She wrote that if she could change one thing, it would be that she never met Bruce Hartman." The divorce was finalized not long after, with Chrissy granted visitation on Wednesdays and Fridays. Initially, our interactions were awkward and formal, but over time, we began sharing occasional meals as a family. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Chrissy hesitated before asking, "Ron, would it be okay if I stayed the night?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "No, Chrissy, the spare room isn't exactly comfortable, and you'd be better off heading home." As for Bruce Hartman, I eventually learned the full story. His wife hadn't died in an accident, as Chrissy had believed. She had been speeding away from him after catching him cheating. Poetic justice arrived in the form of a bar fight. Bruce ended up with 5 broken ribs, a shattered kneecap, several missing teeth, and, most notably, 2 crushed nuts. Chrissy slowly rebuilt her relationship with the kids, though Ron always maintained some emotional distance. He was polite but reserved, never fully letting her back in. 3 years later, I remarried. The woman I married, Sally's teacher. She became an integral part of our family, and the kids adored her. Chrissy never completely accepted that I had moved on, but as I had once told her, the discussion was over. She had 2 choices: accept it or don't. I couldn't believe the nonsense Nikki, my 7-year wife, had just thrown my way. In mere moments, I realized how little she truly valued me. We were at a mountain resort for her older sister Kirsten's bachelorette party, which spanned 4 days. This was Kirsten's 3rd marriage, and I couldn't help but ponder how she had managed to wrangle her current fiancé. Was it her wealth, or perhaps some form of coercion? Given her profession as a lawyer, I assumed she had likely coerced him into signing an extensive prenuptial agreement, possibly employing tactics reminiscent of medieval torture. The day prior to Wednesday, we opted to utilize one of the public hot tubs available at the resort. Earlier, Kirsten had jokingly cautioned us about the possibility of encountering undressed men in the hot tubs. I had dismissed it as jest, but it turned out to be true. It appeared that clothing was optional in these baths. As we immersed ourselves in the water, I noticed 5 men across from us in the unclothedness, confirming my earlier suspicion. They nonchalantly exited the tub, dried off, and lounged on their chairs, seemingly unfazed by their exposure. However, one individual, a tall, muscular man with long hair tied back in a ponytail, reclined on the grass beside the hot tub, with one leg raised, drawing attention to his substantial endowment. I observed Nikki gazing at him with a distant look in her eyes. I suppose I should step back and give you a bit of background about us. My name's Ned Carson, and my wife is Nikki. I'm 39 years old, while she's significantly younger at just 32. Once upon a time, I served as a police officer, but my career came to an abrupt halt when I was shot several times in the line of duty, resulting in health-related dismissal. This was before I crossed paths with Nikki. She was among the physical therapists who aided in my rehabilitation to regain mobility after my injuries. Walking remains a challenge for me, but I managed to get by. Following my departure from the force, I transitioned into private investigation work. Fortunately, much of my tasks involved desk work or surveillance from my car, minimizing the need for physical exertion. I partnered with a seasoned detective until his untimely demise from a heart attack. Assuming his responsibilities, I now report to my former boss's associate. Nikki and I dated, fell in love, and tied the knot. The initial 5 years of our marriage were blissful, or so I believed. However, a couple of years back, I received a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol, exacerbated by my 2-pack-a-day smoking habit. Despite medication, my carnal performance suffered, and attempts to quit smoking only left me irritable. Initially, Nikki appeared understanding, and we made efforts to navigate the challenges. Although my stamina waned, I prioritized her satisfaction. Yet, over time, Nikki underwent a transformation from a caring, affectionate partner to someone I scarcely recognized, bossy and prone to unwarranted outbursts. Nothing I did seemed to appease her anymore. To compound matters, our closeness dwindled over the past year. Despite my efforts to salvage our relationship, it seemed futile. I held on to hope that our getaway to a mountain resort might reignite the flame between us, but it became evident that our situation was beyond repair. As I observed the man openly flaunting himself to Nikki with utter disregard, a sense of familiarity washed over me, yet I couldn't quite place him. Earlier on Thursday, Nikki mentioned going shopping with her sister, so I opted for a round of golf. Returning earlier than expected, I freshened up and dressed, hoping to treat Nikki to dinner and dancing, perhaps leading to closeness later. As I dressed, Nikki entered the room in a bathrobe, her hair damp and her cheeks flushed. Sitting on the bed, she gazed at me for a moment. "I thought you were going shopping with Kirsten," I remarked. "Changed my mind," she replied. "I went to the hot tub instead." "I see," I responded. "Any sightings of undressed men today?" "Oh yes," she said with a grin. "There was this guy with a ponytail named Ramon Torres. He's working at a film studio out west. You'd like him." That's when it clicked. I recognized him instantly. Indeed, Torres works at a film studio, though his work may not grace the big screen. It tends to be rather subpar. "So you've gotten to know this Ramon fellow," I remarked. "A bit," she admitted with a snort. "And some of his buddies." "I see," I said. "Did you have a good time?" "Best I've had in years," she confessed. "Was this your plan all along?" I inquired. Her demeanor shifted, the shrew returning. "Yes, it was," she admitted. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman before me. She met my gaze before continuing. "You have no idea. For years, you were the only carnal partner I had. But the past 2 years have been pure torment. I crave closeness, yet you can't perform half the time." "Do you know why?" she challenged. "It's those damn medications the doctor prescribed," I retorted. "It's not my fault." "Of course it's your fault," she fired back. "Years of smoking, drinking, junk food, and neglecting exercise. Now you're paying the price, and so am I. I need a real man, someone well-endowed, someone who doesn't bend to my every whim. I need someone who takes charge, not someone who sits behind a desk and avoids confrontation." I felt as though I'd been sucker punched. I couldn't wrap my head around what she was confessing. I shook my head in disbelief, questioning if this nightmare was real, but she wasn't finished. "Do you know what he did?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "He ordered me to strip right there in front of everyone." "And you complied?" I inquired, already anticipating the answer. "Of course I did," she replied, shedding her robe to reveal her undressedness. "And did you have physical involvement with them too?" I asked, though I already suspected the truth. She chuckled as she revealed. "Have physical involvement? No, I had lovemaking with them, all of them, even engaged in a trio activity, and yes, I let them all have their way with me. And you know what else?" "What?" I responded quietly, trying to contain my fury. "They're on their way here now, ready to ravage me in this bed while you watch," she declared. I rose from the bed and retrieved my suitcase from the closet. "What are you doing?" she queried. "Running away like a coward?" I took a deep breath and counted to 10 before replying. I remembered what it was about Ramon that drove me insane. He had a vile tendency of ensnaring women with lovemaking and medications, then coercing them into adult films. Once done, he'd cast them aside, leaving them to fend for themselves as fallen women. The authorities tried to stop him numerous times to no avail. If you were wise, you'd flee too, I advised. But wisdom isn't your strong suit, is it? Have your fun if you wish, but it's over between us. Give my regards to your sister. With my suitcase packed, I made my way to the door. You're just going to leave me? She taunted, a smirk on her face. Yes, I'm leaving, I declared. I'm tired of your antics, and I refuse to be your compliant, betrayed man. Farewell. With those final words, I exited the room. Walking down the hallway, I spotted Ramon and his entourage strolling in my direction. Once they passed, I called out to him. Ramon! I shouted. He turned, meeting my gaze. What's up? He inquired. Removing my wedding ring, I tossed it to him. She's all yours if you want her, I stated as he caught it. I'm finished with her. He smirked, slipping the ring into his pocket. Whatever you say, man, he replied, chuckling before sauntering off. Heading to my car, I loaded up and drove away, stopping to grab a pack of cigarettes and a six-pack of beer. At that moment, I was indifferent to my fate, opting to drown my sorrows or break something. 3 hours later, I arrived home, half expecting a call or apology from Nikki, but none came. Forget it, I thought to myself. With plenty of time left in the day, I took matters into my own hands. If Nikki believed she could indulge in her escapade and return home as if nothing happened, she was sorely mistaken. I called a locksmith and arranged for all the locks to be changed promptly, willing to pay extra for swift service. Grabbing a beer, I sat on the back porch with a notepad, jotting down tasks to tackle. Having dealt with enough cases involving infidelity, I knew the routine. Typically, the husband got the short end of the stick while the wife walked away with half. Aware that I couldn't file for divorce on grounds of infidelity due to no-fault regulations, I made note of it. After drafting my plan, I indulged in a few more beers and cigarettes before retiring to bed, hoping to awaken from this dreadful nightmare. However, that scenario didn't unfold. The following morning, I rose and checked my phone, desperately hoping for a change of heart from Nikki. But it never came. No calls, no texts, complete silence. I sipped my coffee and phoned Nick Parsons, a prominent lawyer we both knew well. After recounting the situation, he assured me he'd draft divorce papers. We agreed to serve Nikki at her workplace on Monday for maximum impact. You know the drill, Ned, Nick cautioned. Don't do anything reckless. You've got me, I assured him. I mean it, he reiterated. Speak to your boss about arranging someone to watch over your wife. And Ned, I don't want you involved in this mess. Stay clear as much as possible. Understood, I acknowledged. After our conversation, I rang my boss, Paul Drake. Hey, Ned, thought you and your wife were off in the mountains, he remarked. What's up? Everything okay? Not really, Paul, I confessed. He listened as I shared my tale. Damn, he muttered once I finished. That's rough. Want me to send someone to keep tabs? Yeah, that'd help, I agreed. But it had to be someone unfamiliar to Nikki. I've got it handled, Paul assured me. I've dealt with situations like this. Follow Nick's advice and stay out of trouble. I'll dispatch someone pronto. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it, I expressed before ending the call. I proceeded to the bank to handle our accounts, splitting them and canceling Nikki's credit card. While I considered canceling her ATM card, I opted to keep it active to monitor any charges she might make, but I reduced the daily withdrawal limit. Once done, I visited another bank to open an account solely in my name. I stopped at a diner for a pastrami sandwich before heading home, realizing there was nothing more I could do but wait. Eventually, I felt it was time to take stock of myself. I needed to take action. Stepping on the bathroom scale, I noted my weight, 98 kilograms. Examining myself in the mirror, I saw remnants of my former physique, but some fat had accumulated and my once-toned muscles had softened. No wonder Nikki had lost interest in closeness, I mused. Frankly, I wouldn't be eager for closeness either in my current state. I recalled the doctor's advice about managing my diabetes by maintaining a weight below 200 pounds. Despite initially disregarding his nutrition guide, I now reconsidered. Perhaps in a way, Nikki was correct. I had allowed myself to deteriorate. However, she didn't need to resort to her actions. If she truly loved me, I reasoned, she would have communicated her concerns earlier. Determined to enact change, I resolved to overhaul everything right then and there. Grabbing the phone book and a pack of cigarettes, I headed out to the back porch to search for nearby gyms. After finding a couple, I planned to check them out. Just as I was about to leave, my phone rang. Seeing an unfamiliar number, I answered anyway. "Carson," I greeted. A female voice on the other end spoke up. "Ned, where are you?" she inquired. I recognized Kirsten's voice, though we hadn't spoken much before, so I was surprised by her call. "Yes, I left last night," I confirmed. "Why do you ask?" "We were just wondering what happened," she explained. "Nikki seemed really upset and retreated to soak. I've never seen her like this." She went on to mention that there was a fight between us, and I left. "What's going on?" she inquired. "Maybe you should ask her," I suggested. "Is everything okay between you two?" she pressed. "No, that's not the case," I responded. "Did you know Ramon Torres and his team are at the resort?" "Yes, they're providing entertainment for our bachelorette party," she confirmed. "I also arranged for them to bring a film crew." "Why?" I probed. "Just curious," I evaded. "Did Nikki know?" I asked. "Yes, I told her," Kirsten replied. "To be honest, I was surprised when you showed up. It was supposed to be a girls' thing. But if you're both into that lifestyle, then it's none of my business." "So you knew she planned to do that with me?" I clarified. "Yes, we all knew," she admitted. "Why do you ask? Is there a problem?" "Nothing I can't handle," I assured, keeping my cards close. "Do you want me to tell Nikki to call you?" Kirsten offered. "No need," I declined. "Just let her enjoy herself, okay?" Kirsten advised. "She still loves you. When she's done, she'll come back to you. It's just lovemaking." "No, it's more than that," I disagreed. "It's a heartless, calculated betrayal, and you facilitated it." "Please calm down," Kirsten dismissed. "It's just a weekend. You'll pick her up on Sunday, right?" "No," I stated firmly. "She can find her own way back, but she's not welcome here." I heard Kirsten gasp, but I brushed it off. "Goodbye, Kirsten," I concluded, ending the call. Frustrated and angry, I contemplated punching a wall, but instead went to the gym, channeling my rage into the punching bag until my arms grew weak, then took a shower. "Are you all right?" a man inquired as I was dressing. I glanced up to see one of the trainers standing nearby. "Not really, but thanks for asking," I replied. "I noticed you on that punching bag," he remarked. "I was concerned you might hurt yourself. Do you want to talk about it?" "What the heck?" I pondered. Taking a seat, I took a deep breath. He joined me on the bench, patiently waiting. Eventually, I divulged the entire story. "I'm sorry to hear that," he sympathized. "Please call me Ned," I requested. "Okay, Ned," he responded. "Listen, if you're looking to get back in shape, I can assist you. But I think you need more than just weight loss. I can recommend a good counselor if you're interested." Reflecting for a moment, I realized he was correct. I was a wreck, both physically and emotionally. "What the heck?" I agreed. "Looks like I could use all the help I can get." He chuckled, handing me a business card. "Rose Carlson, counselor," it read. "Give her a call," he suggested. "She's excellent, especially in situations like yours." "Yes, I'll do that," I affirmed. "By the way, I couldn't help but notice you avoid putting weight on your right leg," he pointed out. I explained about my injury from the shooting. He listened attentively, nodding in understanding. "I can assist you with that if you're interested," he offered. "We can also guide you with your diet and exercise routine, particularly tailored for individuals with diabetes. Are you ready to commit to this?" After pondering, I responded. "Absolutely," I affirmed with a nod. I knew I needed to take action, and quickly. "All right," he agreed. "Let's get you signed up. By the way, I'm John Green." He offered his hand, and I shook it. "Ned," I introduced myself. "Ned Carson." "Carson," he repeated. I recognized that name. Wait a minute. You're the cop who saved my grandmother during a bank robbery, right? This was about 8 years ago? I was shot during that robbery. It's great to finally meet you. How's your grandmother?" I inquired. "She's doing well," John confirmed. "Thank you for asking." Guiding me to the front desk, John enrolled me in a program designed to help me shed weight and regain strength. He introduced me to his colleagues, highlighting my heroic past, and they expressed gratitude for my service. "If you have any questions, feel free to ask," John offered as we concluded, "and be sure to get in touch with Rose." "I will," I promised. "Thanks for everything, John." Exiting the gym, I felt a sense of upliftment I hadn't experienced in a while. It was refreshing to receive appreciation from someone. Upon returning home, I scheduled an appointment with Rose for the following Tuesday, though I held on to a sliver of hope for contact from Nikki. None came. However, Paul reached out to inform me they had an operative observing Nikki and would update me accordingly. Thanks, I acknowledged, relaying my plans to meet with Rose. All right, Paul replied. It's good to see you taking positive steps, Ned. Take your time sorting things out. I'll keep you posted on our observations from the resort. Just try to stay calm, all right? I gotcha, I assured him. Wrapping up our conversation, I attempted to unwind, but relaxation proved elusive. A part of me yearned to drown my sorrows in drinks. Yet, my rational side intervened. Throughout the weekend, I anxiously awaited news but heard nothing until Sunday. Around 10:01 a.m., Paul reached out, informing me that Nikki had departed with Ramon and his team earlier that morning. Looks like she had a packed weekend, he remarked, detailing the array of evidence they had gathered. I'll pass all this on to Nick and provide you a copy if you're interested. Any idea where they went? I queried. Not a clue, Paul admitted. They left around 9 a.m.? Got it, I acknowledged. Assuming she returns, she should be back around noon. Paul agreed. That's the plan. Keep me posted if she turns up, he urged. Will do, I affirmed, concluding our exchange. I'll do that, I assured him before wrapping up our conversation. Taking a leap of faith, I dialed Nikki's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Nikki, call me back when you can, I left a message. I know you left the resort. Call me. Ending the call, I dialed Kirsten's number, and she picked up after the third ring. Hey, Ned, she greeted me. You missed quite the party. Yeah, I gathered, I replied. Looks like Nikki took off with Ramona. Yeah, they left early today, she confirmed. Any idea where they're headed? I inquired. No clue, she admitted. I figured they might be heading your way, but I can't say for sure. Do you even care if she comes back? Hey, don't take it out on me, she snapped. Nikki's an adult. She can do what she wants. If she decides not to come back, that's not on me. Now leave me alone. With those words, she concluded our conversation. I stashed my phone in my pocket and settled into the living room, waiting. It's remarkable how time seems to drag when you're watching the clock. The minutes crept by slowly. Soon it was noon, and Nikki was still nowhere to be seen. I waited anxiously, but there was no sign of her. Another hour passed with no word from Nikki, and my voicemail remained unanswered. I tried using a search app on my phone to locate her, but it was fruitless. It appeared she had powered off her phone and removed the battery, making tracking impossible. Switching to my computer, I checked my email, but there was nothing. I continued to wait, growing increasingly restless. By 6 p.m., there was still no sign of Nikki. I began to worry that she hadn't made it home, or worse, had been in an accident. Along the way, I reached out to Paul, who made inquiries, only to discover that she hadn't been admitted to any hospital and hadn't encountered law enforcement as far as he knew. On my way, an idea struck me, prompting me to return to my computer. I reasoned that if she used her card at the ATM, the transaction would show up in our account. Upon accessing the online banking portal, I noticed a charge of $200 made around 9:45 a.m. at the airport, conveniently located near the resort. This amount matched the daily limit I had set on her card on Friday. With this information, I speculated that she had chosen to fly off with Ramon and his entourage. But to where? Opening another browser window, I searched for flights departing from that airport and found options to Los Angeles, Playa, Miami, San Francisco, Dallas, and Seattle around 11. Knowing Ramon resided on the West Coast, I surmised that might be her destination. Yet, certainty awaited her next card usage. I briefed Paul on the latest developments. We'll need to wait for her next card usage, he reasoned. That may not occur until tomorrow at the earliest, I replied, and by then she could be anywhere. Have you considered reporting her missing? He inquired. The police typically require a 24-hour absence before acting, I informed him. Then waiting seems to be our only option, he concluded. Is there any clue in the video transcripts about her intended destination? I probed. It's possible. We might need to comb through it meticulously, he suggested. Are you up for the task? I must do something, I affirmed. There has to be a clue about her whereabouts. All right, come over to my place and we can delve into this further, he offered. But I must warn you, the footage isn't pleasant. I don't care, I asserted. I need to unravel this mystery and determine if she'll ever return. Then come, he urged. We concluded our conversation, and I drove to Paul's house within the bounds of the law. Upon arrival, his wife Donna greeted me at the door. Can I offer you a drink, Ned? Coffee, perhaps, or would you prefer a beer? She inquired. I need to gather my thoughts, I replied. Coffee would be perfect, thank you. All right, she acknowledged. Paul's in his office, so head straight there. Making my way to Paul's home office, I observed him poring over a thick stack of papers. He glanced up as I entered. "Come in, Ned," he welcomed. "Take these and see what you can uncover." Handing me the papers, I settled in to examine them. As expected, the contents were far from pleasant. Mostly it consisted of Nikki pleading for more intense and rapid physical involvement, accompanied by crude remarks from Ramon and his associates about her attributes. Much of it was repulsive and immature, in my opinion. I couldn't ignore the obligatory insults directed at me from Nikki and her paramours. "It's a shame your sorry husband was too spineless to stick around," Ramon remarked. "Yeah, well, he's missing out," Nikki retorted. "He'll never lay a hand on me again." "He handed me his ring when he left," Ramon informed her. "Said you're all mine now and it's over with him." Laughter ensued. "Maybe I'll urinate on him for old time's sake," she joked. More laughter. In that moment, I questioned what I ever saw in her. Good riddance to bad rubbish, I mused. We continued to sift through the transcripts, searching for any clue. Suddenly, Paul exclaimed, "Hold on," he interjected. "I think I've found something." "What is it?" I inquired. "It was late Saturday night, around 11:45 p.m., he explained. "Here, read this. Let me know your thoughts." Accepting the transcript, I began reading a few lines prior to the indicated point to grasp the context more fully. "Man, boss, she's the best we've had in a long time," remarked one of Ramon's accomplices. "We could rake in a ton of cash with this chick's assets." "You really think so?" inquired Ramon. "Oh, absolutely," chimed in the other henchman. "What do you say?" Ramon asked. "Ready to make some serious dough?" "I'm not some damn floozy," Nikki retorted. Laughter ensued. "No, sweetheart, I'm talking about movies. Online videos," clarified Ramon. "With your incredible body and pretty face, all you need to do is what you're doing now, but in front of the camera. It's natural for you. I've been brainstorming a whole new series of betrayed man's movie and humiliation videos, and you'd be perfect for it." "Yes. When can I start?" she inquired. "We could head out right after the party if you're up for it," suggested Ramon. "I'll set you up with a nice place in Los Angeles, and you'll work exclusively for me. Of course, I'll take a cut, but you could make a fortune with enough videos." "Can I get some more of that stuff you gave me earlier?" she asked. "And a bit of that euphoria pills?" "Whatever you desire, babe," he assured her. "So I get all the lovemaking I want and get paid?" she questioned. "And I get to humiliate losers like Ned?" "That's the idea," confirmed Ramon. "You can count me in," she affirmed. "What about your pathetic husband?" inquired one of the accomplices. "Are you going to spill the beans to him?" "Screw him. He's ancient history," she declared. "He'll never lay eyes on me again. When do we leave?" "First thing tomorrow," stated Ramon. "We'll depart at 9 in the morning, hit the airport, and head west." "Hell yeah!" she exclaimed. "Let's do it." I handed the transcript back to Paul. "Do we have this on video?" I queried. "Yep, let me just grab the disc and fire it up," he replied. Inserting a disc into his computer, he played the video, skipping to the timestamp indicated in the transcript. He glanced at me before hitting play. "Ready for this?" he inquired. "Let's just get it done," I replied. He pressed play on the video, and I observed the scene unfolding through Nikki's room window. She lay undressed on the bed, accompanied by Ramon and his associates, one of whom wielded a camera. A tray with multiple white powder shots sat nearby, evident from Nikki's behavior. I scanned for any other figures but found none, though I wouldn't be surprised if Kirsten was involved. We watched the video while following along with the transcript. After their conversation, they engaged in group lovemaking again. "That's enough," I muttered in disgust. "Turn it off." Paul shut down the video and glanced at me. "Well," he prompted, "she's clearly participating willingly, even under the influence of white powder and who knows what else," I explained. "So there's no basis for a kidnapping charge, and I didn't spot Kirsten in the video, so it's unlikely she's aware. Even if she knew, she wouldn't speak up. However, we should still make an earnest attempt to locate her for notification purposes." "Do you have any contacts in Los Angeles?" Paul asked. "You know I have connections everywhere," I reassured him. "I'll make some calls and see what I can find. Once you locate her, inform me," I requested. "I want to deliver the documents personally." "Absolutely not, Ned," Paul objected. "That's not happening. I know you're in a lot of pain, but you shouldn't involve yourself any further. I know you well. You might do something rash, and I'd have to bail you out of jail. Stay put. Let Nick and me handle this. I'll revoke your license if you even consider leaving. Understand?" "Understood," I conceded, raising my hands. "I'll behave, I promise." "You better," Paul warned. "I'll make some calls and update Nick. Don't worry, I'll keep you informed. Now go home, relax, and take a few days off. In fact, consider yourself on vacation effective immediately. I can't do that, Paul, I objected. I have a business to run. Everything's under control. Consider it in order. Are you on vacation starting now? He reiterated. Okay, I acquiesced. I'm on vacation. I'll behave and head home. We shook hands and I left, thanking Donna for the coffee. I briefly considered grabbing a beer but opted to drive home instead. It turned out to be a good decision, as the house phone rang just as I stepped into the living room. Hello? I answered when I picked up the receiver. Seeing Kirsten's number on the caller ID, I activated the recording feature on my answering machine. Hi, Ned, it's Kirsten, she greeted. Yes, I recognize the number, I responded, and I should let you know I'm recording this conversation. I hope that's all right. Of course, she replied. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably do the same. So, what's on your mind, Kirsten? I inquired. I just heard from Nikki, she revealed. She asked me to represent her interests in case you decide to file for divorce. Do you know where she is? I probed. She mentioned she's in Miami now, but she plans to move around a lot and may not return soon, Kirsten disclosed. In Miami, huh? I remarked. I suspected she was either lying or being misled. I see, she confirmed. That's what she told me. She also mentioned that you're likely considering divorce, I stated. That's correct. Divorce proceedings are underway, I confirmed. Once they're prepared, send them my way, she instructed. I'll email you my address. I'll relay the message, I assured her. Were you aware of her intention to leave me and pursue a career in adult films with Ramon Torres? I questioned. No, Ned, I had no idea, she admitted. I understand you may not think highly of me, but I'm being sincere. I thought she was merely using her involvement with him to provoke a reaction from you. I didn't realize she intended to leave. It was quite a shock when she told me. I know you're fundamentally a good person, Ned, so please accept my apologies. Did you know about the medications he administered to her? I pressed. White powder and euphoria pills, she replied. I knew about euphoria pills, but not white powder, she added. We all took some euphoria pills that night, but I didn't see any white powder. You know what he does with the girls he recruits, right? I questioned. He makes adult films, she clarified. He specializes in group videos and humiliation. He decided to start a new series featuring more mature amateur women like Nikki. But I didn't know he had his eye on her. You didn't answer my question, I reminded her. Do you know what he does with them? I don't understand you, she responded. Don't play dumb, Kirsten, I insisted. He exploits them, drains them. Then he casts them out onto the streets where they're forced to do anything for their next fix. Is this what awaits your sister? How long do you think she'll last? Is this a concern for you? She asked. Oh, please, I retorted sarcastically. No matter how much I despise her now, I wouldn't wish this fate on anyone, not even you. Where's your concern for your sister? It's none of your business, but I'll take her in before I let this happen to her, she stated. Make sure she knows that, I insisted. From what I know about him, he'll probably discard her within 5 years, maybe less. I hope you have a spare room ready. You don't have to worry about the size of my place, she assured. All I need to know is what you want in the divorce. You'll find out soon enough, I informed her. Very well, she acknowledged. Do you want me to relay a message to Nikki? She offered. No, I declined. I have nothing to say to her at the moment. Well, then, I suppose we have nothing further to discuss. Ned, once again, I'm sorry this happened. Instruct your lawyer to send the documents directly to me. Any communication will be through me, she concluded. Goodbye, Ned. After ending the conversation and stopping the recording, I called Nick and briefed him on Kirsten's statements. Representing her own sister's interests right after enabling her actions, he remarked. Isn't this unethical? I inquired. No, not necessarily, Nick responded. But it certainly doesn't look good. We'll send Kirsten a copy of the documents, but I want to see if we can locate your wife and inform her in person. There's too much risk that Kirsten won't deliver the documents to her sister and then claim she wasn't properly notified. Do you think she would really do that? I inquired. Oh yeah, Nick confirmed. You'd be surprised at some of the things I've seen her do. I'll speak with Paul and see if we can locate Nikki. If not, we'll resort to what's known as divorce by publication. What does that entail? I asked. Well, when a spouse absconds and can't be located, we can pay to publish the divorce notice in a newspaper, where she's likely to come across it at least once a week for 4 weeks, he explained. If she's indeed in the Los Angeles area, as we suspect, we'll publish it both locally and in the LA Times. And of course, we'll still send a copy of the documents to Kirsten, right? I clarified. Absolutely. Sending it to Kirsten doesn't guarantee Nikki's notification, Nick affirmed. We continued our conversation before eventually ending the call. I grabbed a snack, smoked a cigarette, and retired to bed. Over the ensuing weeks, we monitored Nikki's ATM activity and deduced that she was likely situated in the Long Beach, California vicinity. Paul reached out to his contact in Los Angeles and discovered that investigators had spotted her at various nightclubs, where she had been performing on stage, though pinpointing her exact whereabouts remained elusive. Pat Silva, Nikki's supervisor at the therapy clinic where she worked, rang up to inquire about her absence. Upon learning that Nikki had decided on a career change, I calmly informed her of the situation. "What do you mean, career change?" Pat queried. "Haven't you heard?" I responded. "She's chosen to pursue a career in adult filmmaking." "What?" Pat exclaimed. "Yes, she aspires to be an adult film star and a medication user," I stated. "She's somewhere in Southern California pursuing her dream as we speak. I'm surprised she didn't inform you, Ned." "You better not be joking," Pat cautioned. "I'm afraid it's true," I confirmed. "So she won't be returning, right?" Pat sought reassurance. "I'd be very surprised if she did," I admitted. "Okay, I'll process her final payment and terminate her employment," Pat decided. "Where should I send it?" "For now, you can mail it to me," I replied. "I'll pass it on to her lawyer." "All right, Ned," Pat said. "I'm sorry to hear about this. She'll be missed." "Thank you, Pat," I acknowledged, concluding our conversation. I received Nikki's last paycheck and forwarded it to Kirsten as pledged. Whether she relayed it to Nikki, I couldn't say, nor did I particularly care. I commenced my sessions with Dr. Rose, who proved to be an excellent therapist, attentive and understanding. Initially fearing I might face blame for Nikki's actions, I was relieved to find Dr. Rose didn't attribute fault to me. By the end of the first month, I began to feel noticeably better. Regular visits to the gym also contributed to my well-being. Shedding a few pounds, I adopted a sustainable diet with John's assistance. Before long, I started to catch glimpses of my former self in the mirror. Nick was also occupied. After crafting a notably biased divorce petition, he ran it in the local newspaper and the LA Times twice weekly for 4 weeks. As the 4th week neared its close, he graciously sent Kirsten a copy, which left her dissatisfied. She demanded an urgent meeting with me and Nick in his conference room. "What does all this mean?" she demanded upon our gathering. "This is an affront, not a divorce request. What's the aim behind demanding a 75-25 split with no alimony?" "The true affront is what your client did to her husband. With your assistance, I might add, given her decision to abandon the marriage. My client and I believe this is the appropriate course of action," Nick asserted. "She didn't even bother to remove her belongings from my client's home. He hasn't even been served the papers yet," Kirsten seethed. "That's because your client was evading in the Los Angeles area," Nick explained. "Since we lacked her address and you weren't forthcoming about her whereabouts, we resorted to filing for divorce by publication. A 4th notice has just been published in both local and LA Times." "I'll contest this, you'll see," she threatened. "As you wish," Nick replied, and contest she did. She filed motions that went nowhere and requested counseling, which the judge reluctantly sanctioned. I was taken aback when Nick informed me of this. "Don't fret," he reassured. "Judge Potter despises traitors and favors law enforcement. Kirsten thinks she's in control, but in reality, she's giving Nikki just enough rope to hang herself." "What do you mean?" I inquired. "Nikki likely won't show up for the counseling," he predicted. "Judge Potter detests disobedience to his orders. In such cases, he's likely to issue a bench warrant for her arrest." "That's what I hope for," I expressed. I arrived punctually at the counselor's office designated by the court, but predictably, Nikki was a no-show. I knew the counselor, Judy McGregor, from her previous work with me after I was shot. We spent an hour catching up, during which I recounted my story. "I gather you can't fathom reconciling with your wife?" she deduced. "Not at all," I affirmed. "All right," she acknowledged. "I'll report this to the judge along with her absence. Best of luck, Ned. It was good to see you again." According to Nick's later account, Judge Potter was incensed by Nikki's disregard for his orders and issued a bench warrant for her arrest. He informed me the warrant remained valid for 5 years. We continued to monitor her ATM usage and observed that while most of her transactions occurred in the Long Beach area, she also made multiple withdrawals in San Francisco and San Diego during the same period. It appears she was quite active simultaneously. I conducted a search and found several brief videos featuring her. I could only endure watching them for a few minutes and noticed they all involved the same group, scenes of carnal activity and humiliation purportedly targeting a husband. I felt nauseated realizing that this was likely what she wanted to subject me to. Finally, a court date for our hearing was scheduled. I met Nick at the courthouse and we entered together. Scanning the room, I spotted Kirsten, but Nikki was nowhere to be found. When our turn came to approach the bench, Nick and I took our seats and observed Kirsten sitting alone at her table. Judge Potter expressed his dissatisfaction at seeing her unaccompanied. "And where is your client?" he inquired. "She's not feeling well at the moment," Kirsten responded. "Unwell?" questioned Judge Potter. "What does that mean? She's currently working," Kirsten added. "Working?" the judge repeated. "She's an adult film actress, for heaven's sake. Are there no breaks in her schedule? Is her job more important than this divorce? She simply couldn't make it, Your Honor," Kirsten argued. Judge Potter sighed heavily and glanced at the documents before him. "Very well," he conceded. "Considering this, I will issue another court order, and I am prepared to finalize the divorce decree in court today." "But, Your Honor, we still need to file motions," Kirsten interjected. "I've seen all I need to see, counsel," the judge retorted, clearly irritated. He paused, then continued after surveying both parties. "While there are guidelines governing court awards, it's important to note that in this state, the bench possesses significant discretion in determining marital property division," he explained. "Upon reflecting on this case, I acknowledge the merits of both sides. On one hand, there's a highly decorated former police officer who risked his life protecting a 70-year-old grandmother. On the other hand, there's a woman whose attorney concedes she's a medication-abusing adult film actress who deliberately betrayed and deserted her husband to pursue her depraved lifestyle. And it's my understanding, counsel, that you played a role in facilitating some of your client's actions. I must admit, this is deeply troubling." I reached out to the state bar, and they confirmed no ethical breaches occurred. "However, though you came close to crossing the line, I advise caution in the future," he stated, banging his gavel. "After reviewing all the documents in the attorney's report, I find myself compelled to grant the plaintiff's divorce petition as submitted," he continued. "Best of luck, Mr. Carson, and thank you for your service to the community," he concluded. I glanced at Nick, surprised. "Did we just win?" I queried. He grinned, extending his hand. "Absolutely, Ned. Congratulations, you're now a free man," he affirmed, shaking my hand. Kirsten gathered her belongings and approached us. "Congratulations, Ned," she offered, shaking my hand. "You've exacted your revenge. I hope you find solace in that." I reciprocated the handshake, understanding that losing such a case would be difficult for her. "No, I'm not content," I confessed. "Happiness has eluded me for quite some time." I retrieved a DVD from my briefcase and handed it to her. "You once mentioned that if I needed to convey a message to Nikki, I should inform you. Here's my final message to her. Feel free to view it. I'm indifferent. Additionally, I have a cashier's check for her share of our account. I closed it late last night. I'll make sure she receives it," I murmured. "By the way, what's on the DVD?" she inquired. "Nothing extraordinary," I replied. "Just a brief message for her." In reality, it was more than a mere message. The previous day, I dragged a 50-gallon drum to the backyard and set up the camera on a tripod. While it recorded, I filled the barrel with all her abandoned belongings, including her $2,500 wedding gown, every photograph I possessed of her, and various trinkets she had collected over the years. I even shattered the wedding portrait hanging above our bedroom and stuffed it into the drum. I poured lighter fluid over everything in the drum and ignited it. As it burned, I addressed the camera. "Nikki," I began, "there was a time when I would have taken a bullet for you. Throughout our time together, I loved you wholeheartedly, and I envisioned growing old by your side. Sadly, you had different plans, so that future won't materialize. I've seen glimpses of your work online, and I can't shake the feeling that this is what you intended for me. But that won't happen either. Don't inquire about friendship, as friends don't inflict the pain you did. And don't expect forgiveness from me, for it won't come. I only hope you wake up to reality before it's too late. Farewell, Nikki," I concluded before departing, leaving the camera to capture the final destruction of her remaining possessions in the house. Life moved forward after Nikki. I revamped the house, removing anything even remotely associated with my ex-wife. I continued sessions with Rose and maintained my thrice-weekly gym routine, adhering to our diet plan and discarding my cigarettes. A couple of months later, I stepped on the scale and found I was down to 84 pounds. There was still work to do, but I felt better than I had in ages. The only thing missing was the companionship I once shared with Nikki, and then fate intervened. While shopping for groceries at the local market, I accidentally collided with her. It was a genuine mistake. I wasn't paying attention. After profusely apologizing, I was met with the most enchanting smile. I was momentarily captivated, forgetting to breathe for a moment. Introducing myself, I noticed the absence of any rings on her fingers. Accepting my apology, she introduced herself as Brenda Wilkins. We struck up a conversation, and to my surprise, I mustered the courage to invite her to dinner. Even more surprising was her acceptance. As fate would have it, Brenda was a widowed physician. Her husband and young son had tragically perished in a car accident several years prior, on their way back from a father-son camping trip. Offering my condolences, I shared with her the story of my divorce from Nikki. Amidst our conversation, I mentioned my diabetes and the effects of my medications. Understandingly, she nodded. "I've dealt with similar cases before," she remarked. "Why don't you bring your medications to my office and let's explore what options we have?" Making an appointment, I brought along all my prescriptions. Brenda was taken aback by the sight of them. After conducting some tests, she proposed a few adjustments, and I noticed an immediate improvement. She emphasized the importance of diet, exercise, and quitting smoking, which significantly contributed to my progress. The first time we shared a bed, I felt like a changed man. It was the first time in over 2 years that I felt content. Waking up to Brenda's beautiful face the next morning, I realized I couldn't let go of this newfound happiness. Upon proposing, she showered me with kisses. Following our marriage, we sold our respective homes, combined our finances, and purchased a new residence in a freshly developed area. We both agreed that starting afresh was essential to leave the past behind. A little over a year into our marriage, Brenda gave birth to twins, a boy named Christopher and a girl named Julie. Life carried on for the Carson family, and I discovered the profound joy of fatherhood. About a decade after our marriage, there came a knock at our door. Opening it, I found Kirsten standing there, looking worn out. "Ned, good to see you again," she greeted. "Likewise, Kirsten," I responded, inviting her inside. After settling in, I introduced her to Brenda and the kids. "What brings you here?" I inquired. "This is about Nikki," she revealed. "You were right about Ramon." "About what?" I probed, curious. "It took some time, but he eventually exploited her just as you predicted," she explained. "She confessed to us that she ended up on the streets performing tricks to support her medication habit. Sadly, women like her don't last long in that environment. She managed on her own for a while, but eventually became destitute. Recently, she was discovered unconscious in an alley and taken to a rehab center. I learned of this a few months ago and arranged for her to come here. She's battling cancer, and her prognosis is grim." "You once vowed not to let her reach this point," I remarked. "What happened?" "We lost contact about 6 years ago," she admitted. "The authorities in Los Angeles reached out to me, and I flew out to see her. She's not doing well." "I'm sorry to hear that," I expressed. "What do you need from me?" Kirsten inquired further. "She wants closure," Kirsten elaborated, referring to Nikki. "She wishes to see you one last time. I understand your feelings toward her and me, but I implore you to find the compassion to grant her this final wish." It was an unexpected request. Kirsten was asking for a favor. Glancing at Brenda, I saw the concern mirrored in her expression. "What do you think?" I asked her. "Kirsten is right, dear," she affirmed. "She needs closure, and deep down, you know it too." "How severe is her cancer?" Brenda asked Kirsten. "It's dire," Kirsten responded. "The cancer has spread extensively throughout her body. The doctors mentioned that if they had detected it earlier, they might have had a chance. But now it's too advanced. They've given her a prognosis of a few months, or possibly just hours." "All right," I acknowledged. "I'll go see her." "I'll accompany you," Brenda offered. I agreed and contacted a babysitter. Fortunately, Carla, our neighbor's teenager, was available. Once Carla arrived, Brenda and I followed Kirsten to the hospice. Upon reaching the hospice, Kirsten led us to Nikki's room. I was taken aback upon entering. She was unrecognizable. Tubes protruded from her frail body, and her once beautiful face appeared sallow and discolored. It seemed as though all her former radiance had vanished. As I stood by her bedside, she opened her eyes. "Ned," she whispered, a tear trickling down her cheek. "Is it really you? You look so good." "Yes, Nikki, it's me," I confirmed. "Oh, Ned, I'm so sorry," she choked out between sobs. "I messed up so badly, ruined everything. I know you said you'd never forgive me, but please, I'm begging you. It hurts so much. Please forgive me." Glancing at Brenda, I saw tears welling in her eyes. I knew what I needed to do, though it would be incredibly difficult. Taking a seat, I clasped her hand. It felt cold. "It's all right, Nikki," I reassured her. "I forgive you." She burst into tears, gripping my shirt with her other hand. I embraced her, allowing her to weep on my shoulder. Moments later, a nurse entered, checked her chart, and administered something into her IV. This will help her rest, she explained before leaving. Seeing Nikki drift off to sleep, I gently adjusted her head on the pillow. Thank you for coming, Kirsten expressed. You're welcome, I replied, nodding. How long will you stay? I'll stay until the end, she murmured. I've arranged to work remotely. There won't be a memorial service. It's what she wanted. What happened to Ramon? I inquired. Kirsten retrieved a folded newspaper clipping from her purse. After he threw her out, he replaced her with another girl, she recounted. Her husband didn't take it well and ended up eliminating him brutally. I skimmed through the article. It says disfigured, I noted to Kirsten. Yes, she confirmed. Wow, I murmured. And they're certain her husband was responsible? I inquired. Yes, she affirmed. Witnesses saw him leaving the warehouse. He was acquitted by reason of temporary insanity, she explained. I can see why, I remarked. I felt the same urge myself. I'm sorry, Ned, she expressed, for everything. Yes, I responded softly. In any case, we both felt a sense of remorse after watching that video you gave me, she continued. I never truly considered extramarital affairs until I saw it. Prior to that, it was merely about my own gratification. But after viewing it, my perspective changed. I never comprehended the depth of pain from betrayal or its high cost, she added, casting a glance at Nikki. Thanks to you, I'm not the same woman I was a decade ago. I'm pleased to hear that, Kirsten, I acknowledged. Take care of yourself, Ned, she said, embracing me. And look after my ex-brother-in-law, she addressed Brenda, hugging her. You can count on it, Brenda assured her, returning the hug. We exited and made our way back to the car. Are you all right? Brenda inquired as we fastened our seatbelts. Yes, I'm fine, I assured her, starting the car. Karma, this could become quite unbearable, I contemplated as I drove home.